Chapter 266. Su Ming remained silent. With one move, he quietly moved towards a shaman who was the closest to him within the range of his divine sense. His expression was grave and blood-red light shone in his right eye. It contained a murderous aura, and the moment he closed in on the cruel-looking man, that murderous aura erupted forth from him. The man immediately froze in his tracks and lifted his hands to strike his own face. That strange sight made Su Ming's pupil shrink. At that moment, once the man's hand struck his face, he immediately opened his mouth and coughed out a huge mouthful of blood. At the same time, a dozen-something teeth fell out of his mouth. The moment those teeth flew out, they turned into a dozen-something sharp spikes that charged towards Su Ming at a shocking speed. Su Ming had never seen this sort of art before. He was just about to dodge when the spikes seemed to possess a high level of intelligence. They followed closely behind Su Ming and closed in on him in the span of a breath. What a divine ability of a shaman tribe. Su Ming knew that it was impossible for him to kill the man before him quietly. Green light shone at the center of his brows, and the small virescent sword instantly charged out. When it crashed into the dozen-something spikes coming towards him, booming sounds rang in the air. As those booming sounds rang in the air, the dozen-something spikes all shattered. The small virescent sword charged forward and pierced through the shaman's forehead as he retreated. A blood-curdling scream before death mixed with the rumbling sound, breaking the silence of the forest at night. It was as if a large stone had suddenly been thrown into an ancient well without any ripples, setting off violent ripples. Almost at the same time that scream of pain rang out, Su Ming could clearly sense the remaining dozen-something people immediately changing their direction and charging towards him. They were only about 2,000 feet away from him. Su Ming moved. He knew that he could not escape from the encirclement, so he decided to charge towards another person. He was incredibly quick. Green light shone around him, and with a bang, a corpse with its head separated from its body appeared before Su Ming. At that moment, the remaining people were less than 1,500 feet away from him. Su Ming lifted his head swiftly, and lightning swam through his entire body. At the instant crackling sounds reverberated in the area, a ball of lightning instantly manifested around him. As it expanded outwards, the world rumbled, and if anyone looked from the sky, they would be able to clearly see that the ground seemed to have turned into a lake of lightning with Su Ming as its center. The bolts of lightning spread outwards in a frenzy. Wherever they passed, the mud collapsed, the trees withered, and the grass turned to dust. Most of the dozen people who were over 1,000 feet away from him trembled. However, there were two people who did not encounter any obstructions. At the instant the others froze, they charged towards Su Ming. The two of them closed in on Su Ming in an instant. At the same time they appeared before Su Ming's eyes, bell chimes reverberated from his body. Those bell chimes rumbled and turned into a wave of sound that crashed into the two incoming people, causing one of them to be forced to slow down slightly. However, there was still one person who did not stop and close in on Su Ming. That person was a middle-aged man. There was a long scar on his face, and the tattoos on his face looked as if they had been split apart. The light in his eyes might be filled with brutality, but under that brutality was calmness. That person's level of cultivation was equivalent to the peak of the later stage of the Transcendence realm. He was only one step away from the Bone Sacrifice realm. If Su Ming was at the peak of his condition and ran into this person, he would not lose. However, Su Ming was injured, and his knowledge of the shaman tribe's arts was limited. If they fought against each other, it would be difficult to determine the victor within a short period of time. Once he was pinned down, then the chance he created with the lightning and bell chimes would be wasted in the blink of an eye. Once that chance was wasted, then when the others around him recovered and surrounded him, even if Su Ming could break out of the encirclement, he would still have to pay a great price. Besides, Su Ming did not doubt that the sky was also locked down by the shamans. If time dragged on, then more shamans would arrive from the land of the shamans. Once a powerful shaman who was equivalent to the Bone Sacrifice realm arrived, Su Ming would not be able to fight against him. During the moment of danger, calmness appeared in Su Ming's eyes. However, that calmness was bordering on indifference. The blood-red light in his right eye glowed strangely, and the moment the middle-aged shaman closed in on him, Su Ming lifted his right hand, and a block of ice appeared on his palm. There was fire within that ice. Su Ming crushed that item, and a sea of fire instantly erupted madly from his palm. However, there was not a hint of heat coming from that sea of fire. Instead, there was a freezing chill spreading out from it. That item was given to him by Su Ming's eldest senior brother. The shaman's expression suddenly changed drastically. A large amount of scales instantly grew on his body, and he looked as if he was rapidly changing from a human into some sort of ferocious beast. However, the speed of his transformation could not catch up to the speed of Su Ming creating the fire within the ice. The moment the fire erupted, it was like a huge mouth that swallowed the incoming middle-aged man in one gulp. At the same time, the freezing air that had just spread out gathered around the middle-aged man in an instant. Cracking sounds rang out, and Su Ming sucked in a sharp breath. The scene where even he was shocked by the ice and fire appeared before his eyes. The middle-aged man's body remained in the state where he had turned from a human into a beast. He was sealed in a gigantic block of ice, and his face was filled with shock and disbelief. Su Ming saw a ball of fire within his body. That fire did not seem to be burning, but Su Ming saw the frozen man's body turning black, turning into black ash within the ice. All of this happened in an instant. The ice's strength made Su Ming reevaluate his eldest senior brother's level of cultivation, but this was not the time for him to think too much. With one move, he charged toward the shaman who had stopped due to Han Mountain Bell. That person was not a man, but a woman. The woman was already middle-aged. She had a normal appearance, but there was a tattoo flashing on her face. Her expression was also ferocious, but that ferocious expression turned into shock when she saw Su Ming killing an incredibly powerful shaman in such a bizarre manner with just a lift of his hand. She was just about to retreat when another bell chime reverberated in the air, causing a bang to ring in her head. She could not help but freeze once again, but this time, that pause would be the last in her life. Su Ming moved like lightning and moved past the woman in the span of a breath. When he parted ways with the woman, he brought with him a head that had blood gushing out of it. The woman's body convulsed, and she fell to the ground. At the same time her corpse fell to the ground, Su Ming panted harshly. His face was pale, and the wound on his chest had worsened. In just a short period of time, he had killed several people in succession. Even if the strongest person had used the treasure his eldest senior brother had given him, this sort of quick movement made Su Ming's injured body feel tired. However, he did not stop. Instead, the murderous aura in his right eye surged forth and charged towards the remaining people who were still paralyzed by lightning swimming through their bodies. Moonlight gathered behind Su Ming and turned into the moonlight cloak on his body once again, just like the one he had seen in Dark Mountain. As it danced in the air, it turned into an endless amount of fine threads that floated in the air and moved along with Su Ming's body. Wherever he went, the heads of the shamans who were paralyzed by his origin, lightning flew into the air. As green light shone, the small virescent sword was dyed in blood and let out a piercing sword whistle. When Su Ming closed in on the final person in the span of breath, he swung his arm, and the moonlight threads behind him swept forward. They swiftly wrapped around the person's entire body and tore him apart. The final shaman who had surrounded Su Ming in the forest let out a shrill scream of pain. His body was torn to shreds, and blood splattered everywhere. However, the battle was far from over. Su Ming's ragged breathing did not even have time to calm down. Almost at the instant the final person was killed by the moonlight threads, a furious roar came from the sky. "How dare you, berserker child!" As that voice traveled forth, it was like thunder roaring in the air, causing Su Ming's heart to tremble. When he lifted his head, he saw 8 people coming towards him from the sky. Among these 8 people was an old man. That old man was as thin as bones, but there was a powerful presence exuding from his body that made Su Ming's expression turn incredibly grave. The person who spoke was not this person, but a man among the 8 people. That man's level of cultivation was about the same as the strongest shaman Su Ming had killed. What made Su Ming's pupils shrink was that besides the old man, all the other people in the sky had ferocious beasts that looked like lions and tigers under their bodies. As they roared at Su Ming, the old man did not move, but the remaining 7 people charged towards Su Ming. The brutality in their eyes, the thirst for blood, and the waves of powerful presence made the exhausted Su Ming feel as if he was on the verge of death. Su Ming did not expect that the consequences that awaited him would be so severe just because he had shown mercy once. He had clearly saved that boy's life before he fainted. He had clearly killed that poisonous snake. Su Ming closed his eyes. He knew that he might have been wrong. Perhaps I'm really wrong. As Su Ming mumbled, he sat down cross-legged and lifted his right hand. In this life and death crisis, the instant the 7 people in the sky charged towards him while roaring, his mind went blank. There was no fear, no regret. In fact, he had even forgotten about life and death. The only thing that remained in his heart was the sword that he had copied tens of thousands of times and had already changed into his own. He lifted his hand, closed his eyes, and drew a light slash across the sky. That one slash made it seem as if the weather had changed, as if some sort of seal had been broken. It was different from the time he fought against Tian Lan Ming on the 7th summit. Even if Sima Xian saw that one slash with his own eyes, it would still be difficult for him to find any similarities between it and the first style of the god of Berserker's transformation. That one slash was Su Ming's strongest attack at that moment. The instant he drew that one line, the aloof old man in the sky suddenly changed his expression. He waved his arm, and wisps of smoke instantly spread out from his body, turning into a gigantic lizard made of smoke. It stuck out its tongue towards Su Ming in the sky. Its tongue was so quick that it charged towards Su Ming. It was the first to crash into Su Ming's slash. The prizes for the book review section quiz for May have been mailed out today, but the addresses of 3 of our fellow Taoists are vague and their phone numbers are missing. Please contact the vice moderator as soon as possible to confirm. Lastly, it may be raining outside today, but if you vote, it will be sunny. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 267. That one line was the strongest line Su Ming could draw in his divine ability. He had copied the first style of Sima Xian's god of Berserker's transformation, and after many days and nights, as he drew it while meditating, that one line contained Su Ming's creation. That one line was no longer Sima Xian's sword slash, and neither was it the line he used when he fought against Tian Lan Ming. Instead, it represented Su Ming's life since he started his path of cultivation, represented all the ups and downs he had gone through after he came to the land of South Morning, and represented his memories in Dark Mountain. All of these things fused into that one line, causing that one line to be creation. It was as if Su Ming's one line would never be able to be found in the world before this. That one line seemed to have created something out of nothing, and it created a creation that belonged to Su Ming. That one line in the sky caused the weather to change, but the wind and clouds to remain still. As it sliced through the air, it crashed into the giant lizard tongue that was formed from all the hair on the old shaman's body. A shrill scream of pain and a shocking rumble suddenly reverberated in the forest on the land of the shamans, as if it had pierced through the 9 heavens and traveled in all directions. The tongue of the giant lizard that was formed from smoke immediately crumbled. It was instantly blasted apart by that one line, and the finger sword that belonged to Su Ming. That was not the end. The instant the giant lizard's tongue exploded, the expressions of the 7 berserkers who were pouncing on Su Ming immediately changed drastically. A flash of light appeared briefly in their eyes. That light did not come from their bodies, but was reflected in their eyes as Su Ming's one line shook the sky. The instant that light shone, the 7 people shuddered simultaneously. The person right in front of them trembled and exploded with a bang, turning into a layer of blood mist that dissipated into the air. The second person behind him shuddered violently. His right arm and right leg were separated from his body as if they had been sliced by a sword. As he screamed in pain, he tumbled backwards. A terrifying long gash appeared on the chest of the third person behind him. It was as if his chest had been turned into a drawing board, and Su Ming's line had landed on it. The man coughed out a large mouthful of blood. His face instantly became extremely pale, and there was shock on his face. The fourth person was a young man who seemed to be in his 20s. He was handsome and did not have many tattoos on his face. However, there was a bloody scar on his face that stretched from his forehead to his right chest. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth as he staggered back a few steps before barely stopping. As for the fifth person, the beast hide on his upper body had been reduced to ashes, and a faint line of blood could be seen on his chest. Although it was very faint, it had still cut open his skin, causing blood to flow out. The clothes of the sixth person were also shredded, but there was no wound on his chest. However, his face was still deathly pale. The last person wasn't injured at all, but his body was trembling the most violently. He had seen with his own eyes that one of his companions was dead, one was crippled, and one was seriously injured. The rest of them were all heavily injured. And the source of all this was because the berserker had lifted his right hand and casually swung it across the air. That one slash had taken away his soul and shocked his heart. It made this person's heart tremble, and for some unknown reason, a feeling that he would never be able to fight against Su Ming rose within him. He was not the only one who had this feeling. The others beside him also felt the same way. Su Ming had kept his eyes closed the entire time when he had swung that one line. It looked very casual, as if he had done it with a wave of his hand. But this world creation art had not just heavily injured their bodies, it had also heavily injured their courage. Their hearts. They were afraid. Terrified. Su Ming had rarely fought against the shamans, and similarly, not all shamans had fought against the berserkers before. Su Ming felt that the berserkers' arts were filled with a strange and unfathomable air. Similarly to the shamans, not only were Su Ming's divine abilities bizarre, they also exuded a sort of shock that they could not understand. It was just like why the lightning in the world appeared, and why the rain in the sky did not float up from the ground but fell from the sky. Perhaps there were wise people who could understand these things, but most of the shamans still did not understand them. Su Ming's one line was also something they did not understand. In their eyes, this was not a divine ability, neither was it an art. They could not understand why a single slash from just lifting his hand could contain such shocking power. They also did not know that this one stroke was incredibly rare even in the land of the berserkers, because this was indeed not an art, but creation. This was Su Ming's world creation art. This could be said to be the first time Su Ming had truly brought out the true form of his art of creation in its entirety. It was like eldest senior brother's voice of creation, like second senior brother's hand of creation. At that moment, this was Su Ming's picture of creation. With that one line, he used the sky as the screen, the people as the paper, and he drew it past 7 people. It was as if he had drawn it on rice paper with ink, and the power that seeped into it could seep through several sheets of paper. The first sheet of paper was the thickest, and it would slowly weaken until it reached the last sheet of paper. Su Ming opened his eyes and coughed out a mouthful of blood. At the instant he opened his eyes, he gained an epiphany. Before this, his understanding towards the word creation had always been in a state of ignorance, and he also did not quite understand the creation of the ancients the other berserkers had cast. Tian Xiezi was a good master, but at the same time, he was also not a good master. There were many things he did not tell his disciples, only letting them understand on their own. Once they understood it, they would understand it. At that instant, Su Ming understood what was meant by creation of the ancients. More accurately speaking, the one stroke he had drawn just now could only be considered as one creation of the ancients. However, even though it was one creation of the ancients, this was a true creation. It might seem the same as Ma Xion's 10 Ancients or even 100 Creations of the Ancients, but in truth, it was completely different. When Su Ming could draw 10 strokes, it contained his strongest power, and each stroke was filled with the power of the world that was different from each other. Then once he drew those 10 strokes, he would be known as 10 Creations of the Ancients. If he drew 100 strokes, then he would be able to draw 100 Creations of the Ancients. If he drew 1,000 strokes, then he would be able to draw 1,000 Creations of the Ancients. If Su Ming could reach an unimaginable level with this one stroke and draw 10,000 strokes that had the same form but were different from each other, then that one stroke would be known as the eternal creation of the god of berserkers. This stroke was different from the tens of thousands of strokes he had drawn during his match against Tian Lanming. Those tens of thousands of strokes could only turn into a single stroke that had reached perfection, and what eternal creation needed was this single stroke that had reached perfection. It needed at least 10,000 different strokes before it could be completed. Su Ming understood now. However, at the same time that he understood all this, he also sensed that his heart had undergone an intense change. This change was due to his heart becoming chaotic. Due to that one stroke, just now, two different women had appeared in his mind. One of them was the white-robed Bai Ling standing in the snow, and the other was the purple-robed Bai Su, who had her head lifted with a determined look and a disdainful gaze. These two people were originally different, but they had the same face and the same wild beauty. Change of heart. Su Ming had heard this term a few times from Tian Xiezi. He also knew that he was going through his first change of heart, but in truth, he did not know what it meant to change his heart. Tian Xiezi did not explain this in detail either. He still had the same attitude he had towards his disciple. Su Ming had to understand everything on his own. At that moment, when Su Ming drew that one stroke, it was as if he had fused his entire heart into it. As that one stroke connected with the world, it was as if all his emotions had been released, and once they were completely released, his mind became empty. In that emptiness, he understood the creation of the ancients, and due to the two women appearing in his empty mind, he understood what it meant to have a change of heart. In a person's life, emotions and desires were one of the sources that would affect them. They would cause a person to be unable to calm down, and chaos would appear in their hearts. When that chaos appeared, if they could not deal with it well, then it would be difficult for them to continue training, because if their hearts were not calm, then how could they fuse with other things? At that moment, it could be said that a person's heart had changed. At that moment, they had to think of a way to keep themselves calm. One of the ways was to fight. The change of heart to fight was to prove it through battle. Just like how Tian Xiezi brought Su Ming to see him fight against his 7th junior brother. The second way was to slash. Slash the heart and change of heart. Just like how the moment a purple robe appeared in the land of the shamans, it would not disappear without the hearts of thousands of people. The third way was to forget. Forget the source of the change of heart. Once he forgot, it would disappear. It was just like what Tian Xiezi had said when he brought Su Ming to see the old sunmaker. He's blind. Can you tell? It did not matter whether the old man was blind or not. The meaning behind those words was a form of forgetting. At that instant, Su Ming understood. He also understood his master's love for him. It was not in his words, not in his expression, but in his actions. He was telling him what a change of heart was and what methods he should use to face it. He also understood why his master wanted him to kill the male split dawn. Perhaps there is another deeper meaning to master's words besides telling me about the cruelty of the shamans. At that moment, Su Ming could feel the words that Tian Xiezi did not say. Fight, slash, forget. Master's choice is for me, to slash the change of heart. If he killed Bai Su by slashing the change of heart, then he would be able to resolve the change of heart. Without Bai Su, then he would not be able to stir up Su Ming's memories of Bai Ling. Her shadow would not exist, and he would not be able to calm his heart. If he still could not, then he would forget about it. Once he forgot everything, then he would naturally go through the change of heart. If he still could not, then he would fight. It did not matter whether it was against Sima Xin or against other people. In that battle, he would prove his own heart. This was Tian Xiezi's guidance to Su Ming. If a person who is cold and merciless and does not have any emotions, then would he not have any changes of heart? At the same time Su Ming understood all of this, he was also puzzled. All of these thoughts came to Su Ming at the instant he opened his eyes after he finished drawing that line. He might have seemed to have done it slowly, but in truth he had only just finished drawing the line in the sky with his right hand and had to fall down. As blood flowed out of the corners of his mouth, Su Ming's body swayed and he tumbled backwards, charging into the depths of the forest. His strongest stroke could allow him to fight against the 7 people. But Su Ming knew that he could not fight against the old man who was looking at him with a dark expression in the sky. He could only use the shock brought to the shamans by that one stroke to buy himself a chance to quickly escape. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 268. Su Ming could not see through the old man's level of cultivation. But this person gave him an incredibly dangerous feeling, especially when he executed his strongest slash. That person had not truly attacked, but had instead used a divine ability that Su Ming did not understand to form that gigantic lizard with smoke. He had only touched it with a lizard's tongue. Even though the lizard's tongue had crumbled, Su Ming's strongest attack had only managed to kill one person. More importantly, Su Ming had a strange feeling. It was as if there was a deeper meaning behind the lizard's tongue formed by smoke when he swung that slash just now. Besides canceling out the power of the slash, there was also another reason behind it. That feeling was incredibly strong for Su Ming. He had a vague feeling that at the instant his slash came into contact with that person, it was as if an innumerable amount of invisible eyes had appeared in the world, and they were staring fixedly at all the minute details of his slash. It was as if they were learning. These feelings turned into a sense of danger, causing Su Ming to flee without a hint of hesitation. In the blink of an eye, he rushed into the forest and charged forward. Su Ming knew that if he attacked forcefully in this place, then even if he used all his skills and managed to hold back the old man, it would be difficult for him to survive the battle due to the shamans around. If that was the case, he could use the chance to escape and lure the old man into chasing him down. Then perhaps he would have a chance to counterattack. Once Su Ming left, the 6 people who did not die from the slash in midair looked at their tribe's leader, the supreme patriarch. The old man's face was dark, and he slowly closed his eyes. After a moment, he opened them, and the moment he did so, the giant lizard that had lost its tongue floating around him immediately lifted its head and roared towards the sky. As it roared, an endless amount of smoke appeared out of thin air. Most of them came from the spot where the lizard's tongue had touched Su Ming's slash. They swiftly gathered together and seeped into the giant lizard's body. Very soon, the crumbled tongue appeared once again in the lizard's mouth. The instant its tongue appeared, the lizard stuck its tongue out and drew an arc in midair at lightning speed. If Su Ming was there, he would be able to tell that the arc's trajectory and its appearance were incredibly similar to the one the lizard had drawn previously. However, they were just similar. I didn't expect that the berserkers who came to the land of the shamans this time would have such an epiphany. That style, just now, was different from the other berserkers I've seen. I will personally capture this barbarian. I want him alive and refine him into a shaman puppet. He will become the servant of my tribe's holy spirit. As the old man spoke, 2 pupils suddenly appeared in his eyes. At the same time, they were filled with strangeness. Anyone who looked at them would feel dazzled, and they would not dare to meet his gaze. A brutal smile appeared at the corners of his lips. This sort of chase made him incredibly excited. With one move, he charged towards the direction Su Ming had escaped into the forest. The others in the area looked at each other. In their silence, they could see the respect in each other's eyes. After a long time, they turned into long arcs of light and flew back to their tribe, carrying the seriously injured man with them. Su Ming's breathing quickened in the forest. His body was like an illusion as he charged through the forest filled with rotten leaves and mud. Occasionally, he would leap up and charge through the big trees. When he landed, his feet would not even touch the ground. It was as if he was flying at a low altitude. He was so fast that he could not be seen with the naked eye. Su Ming was not unfamiliar with forests, but as he charged forward, the fear in his heart grew stronger. He did not even need to spread out his divine sense to know that someone was definitely chasing after him. I wonder how many people are chasing after me. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. A golden stone coin appeared in his hand. After a moment of hesitation, he changed it to a white stone coin that was of a lower quality. Once he held it in his hand, the stone coin rapidly became dull and turned into ashes after a moment. However, Su Ming's divine sense had swelled up several times, and as his head throbbed in pain, he spread his divine sense backwards. 1,000 feet, 10,000 feet, tens of thousands of feet. He swept through the area. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, Su Ming's pupils shrank. Once he spread his divine sense to its limit, he used a few more stone coins before he saw a ghastly shadow in the distance behind him. He's alone. All the hairs on Su Ming's body stood up. His face was filled with caution. He saw the person chasing after him. It was the old man, and the old man's familiarity with the forest surpassed his own. But that was nothing. What truly made Su Ming's heart sink was that not only was the old man familiar with the forest, his tracking skills were also incredibly profound. As Su Ming charged forward, he had set up a few tracks to confuse his pursuers, but the man did not change his direction and continued chasing after him. This was something Su Ming could sense clearly as the sense of danger grew stronger. He had also seen it clearly when he used his divine sense to scan the area after it reached its limit. This person's power is definitely at the bone sacrifice realm. Judging by his presence, he's definitely not a normal berserker in the bone sacrifice realm. There's a high possibility that he's in the later stage of the bone sacrifice realm. But when I scanned the area with my divine sense just now, he didn't notice any signs of it. I wonder if it's true or if he did it on purpose. Su Ming had not reached the bone sacrifice realm yet, so it was difficult for him to make an accurate analysis. He could only make a rough guess, and even though he was mentally prepared for it, his face still darkened. Tens of thousands of feet behind Su Ming was the thin old man walking through the forest with a cruel smile on his lips. He had lived in the forest since he was young, and even if he had become the patriarch of the tribe, there were very few people in the tribe who were more familiar with the plants in the forest than he was. Chasing wild beasts in the forest through clues was his most enjoyable activity. Almost every once in a while, he would personally lead the people in the tribe to do this. Now, he was chasing after his prey alone. This was not difficult for him at all. Looks like this young berserker child is also skilled with the art of the forest. The tracks he set up are pretty ingenious, but he's still too immature. The old man licked his lips, and with one step, he traveled several thousands of feet in a flash. Run! Run faster! The old man's smile became even crueler, but it was clear that he did not notice Su Ming scanning the area with his divine sense. Su Ming's face was pale in the forest, and blood seeped out of his chest. This continuous escape made him tired, and at the same time, the murderous look in his eyes became stronger. He brought out several medicinal pills, but as a glint appeared in his eyes, he forced himself not to use them. It's not time yet. I'm weaker than him to begin with, and now that I'm injured, the old man can feel that I'm even weaker, Su Ming mumbled, and his speed gradually slowed down. As he slowed down, Su Ming immediately noticed with his divine sense that the old man's speed had increased by a large margin. The distance between the two of them was rapidly closing in. If I suddenly turn my head around, he'll definitely think that I'm risking my life, but the weaker I am, the less he'll care about his power. A murderous look appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He stopped and turned around, no longer running. Instead, he charged towards the direction the old man was coming from. The two of them might not be able to see each other with their naked eyes in the forest, but they could still sense each other's presence. The instant Su Ming turned his head around and charged forward, the old man immediately sensed him. A cruel smile appeared on his lips, and he became even faster. You want to fight to the death? I'll fulfill your wish. As the old man charged forward, the distance between him and Su Ming swiftly shrank from tens of thousands of feet, when the distance between the two of them was several thousands of feet between the trees and the endless leaves in the forest where sunlight could not be seen. Su Ming leaped over a big tree, and a murderous look appeared in his eyes. When he landed, he lifted his right hand and slammed it against the ground. With that one strike, a beast's skin immediately appeared between Su Ming's right hand and the ground. That beast's skin spread outwards, and a circular area of 100-something feet immediately turned into a red meadow. That meadow looked red to Su Ming, but to anyone else, that place looked exactly the same as the forest around it. There was not a single hint of difference between them. The moment the meadow appeared, Su Ming came to a halt and immediately sat down cross-legged. He brought out some medicinal pills for healing injuries and quickly swallowed them. Those medicinal pills turned into wisps of warmth that started nourishing Su Ming's body. Once he swallowed the medicinal pills, a chilling glare appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He lifted his right hand, and a white scale appeared on his palm. This item was given to him by Uncle Masterby. It contained the power of his strike, and this was Su Ming's final trump card. The mark of the green sword shone at the center of his brows. Lightning swam around his body, and as black mist appeared on his body, the divine general armor manifested. At the same time, Han Mountain Bell appeared indistinctly within his body. Su Ming also brought out spirit plunder by his side. That medicinal pearl floated in midair and let out a strange, enchanting light, as if it contained an endless amount of suction force. Its body was like a void that sucked in everything, including Su Ming's presence. Dark clouds covered the sky. It was almost dusk. There were faint traces of the moon that appeared together with the setting sun. Not much light shone on the ground, but it was difficult for the light to penetrate through the leaves in the forest. Yet even so, besides the murderous aura and calmness in Su Ming's eyes, there was also a circle that looked like a burning moon. A chilling glare appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he brought out another item. It was a golden stone coin given to him by Tian Lanming. Su Ming held it in his left hand, and a vast amount of spiritual power surged into his body. It flowed through the open path and turned into Su Ming's powerful divine sense that was accumulating power. Su Ming's breathing gradually calmed down, and eventually it was so quiet that it could barely be heard. His eyes were incredibly calm, and the murderous aura in his right eye was contained, as if he was waiting for the most critical moment to strike. The instant Su Ming stepped into the red meadow and his presence disappeared, the old patriarch who was charging towards him was taken aback. However, the distance between him and Su Ming had already reached 2,000 feet. At the instant the old man was stunned, a great wave of divine sense with an astonishing sword aura charged forth with a bang from before him with a resolute presence and killing intent that was calm and seeped out of it. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 269. As that divine sense spread outwards, it caused the silent forest to feel as if an invisible wind had turned into a suffocating pressure that descended on them. It caused the big trees before the old shaman to shatter and explode with a bang. Their leaves danced in the air as if they had turned into sharp blades that spun between the ground and the sky. The mud on the ground also let out loud banging sounds, as if there was an endless amount of divine lightning buried within. As all of them exploded, the mud flew everywhere, and waves of rotten air filled the air. The sky was dark, and the forest was originally dark as well. Yet when that divine sense suddenly descended, it caused all the trees, leaves, and everything else in the area to turn into shards that flew everywhere. As the moonlight descended without any obstruction, it was once again shredded by those shards. The shattering of the moonlight was like a massacre of the moon. The old shaman was momentarily stunned. Even if he recovered in an instant, at that critical moment, his shock due to the sudden disappearance of his senses towards Su Ming caused him to lose the initiative. The divine sense charging towards him crashed into the old man's body with an invisible bang. His body did not feel any pain, but at that instant, a storm raged in his head. Thunder rumbled in his head, and he let out a groan that made him bleed from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. Su Ming's divine sense attack was the strongest attack he could deliver ever since he obtained the ability to train his divine sense. It would have been fine if that was all, but he did not hesitate to give up the shocking golden stone coin Tian Lan Meng had given him. That stone coin was golden, and the spiritual power contained within it had even made Su Ming's expression change when he first saw it. This stone coin was definitely not a common item. Su Ming held it in his hands without hesitation and used the power within it to strengthen his divine sense to a degree that was akin to a metamorphosis. It was a life and death crisis. The difference in their levels of cultivation was too great. If Su Ming wanted to survive, then he would attack with the strongest of his abilities. When he attacked, Su Ming's calmness had never been seen before. He still remembered that 2 days ago he was still by his master's side, and 3 days ago he was still in the 9th summit. Yet now he was outside Sky Mist Barrier in the land of the shamans. He was in the forest where the shaman tribe was located, and he had already killed a dozen-something shamans. He was now fighting to the death against the powerful shaman from the tribe. When the old shaman was struck by Su Ming's divine sense, he quickly retreated. Booming sounds rang out in his head, and his vision became blurry. A feeling of fear rose within him, and along with that fear was an ancient rumor buried deep within his heart, along with the deep shock and disbelief he felt towards it. That's... The old man's pupils shrank. As he retreated, his thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a fierce and shocking sword aura. It was a green arc, a sword of green light that had fused with his divine sense and was closing in on him at high speed. The sword was so sharp that wherever it went, the shards dancing in the air would immediately have a tunnel cut open, and all the shards within that tunnel would instantly turn into ashes. When that sword and that ray of green light closed in on the old shaman and was about to pierce through the center of his brows, the old shaman swiftly retreated, and the originally normal pupils in his eyes turned into 4 pupils, as if they had been split apart. Stop! The old shaman let out a loud roar. As he roared, numerous veins immediately popped up at the corners of his eyes and spread to his entire face, as if they had turned into a complicated tattoo. The small virescent sword immediately froze and let out a piercing screech that sounded like it was scraping against something. It could not move forward even an inch. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He sat down on the red meadow where his presence and body were hidden and watched the old man fight against the small virescent sword. This was the first time he saw someone using such a strange method to stop the small virescent sword while he was being attacked by his divine sense. This was not resistance. This was a power similar to his divine sense. Su Ming's mind trembled. He could clearly feel the divine sense he gathered in the small virescent sword being attacked by a chilling presence. That chilling presence was filled with brutality and malice, as if it wanted to destroy Su Ming's divine sense from the small sword. At that instant, Su Ming did not know whether it was just a figment of his imagination, but he could vaguely hear heavy panting coming from within that chilling presence. Those panting sounds were very strange. There were also sounds of chewing mixed within. However, since Su Ming had chosen to attack, then he would definitely not just use his divine sense and the small virescent sword. Almost at the instant the small sword was stopped, and Su Ming's mind started trembling. Killing intent shone in the calmness in his eyes. He lifted his right hand, and spirit plunder instantly charged towards him. Soon after, bolts of lightning appeared out of nowhere behind spirit plunder. As the rumbling sounds echoed in the dark forest, a piercing flash of lightning appeared. With a flash, an endless amount of lightning bolts charged towards the old shaman. At the same time, Su Ming's body was like a drawn bow. As he bent his body, he glared at the old man, standing not too far away from him. His right hand was already clenched tightly. Veins popped up on the old man's face. He lifted his head swiftly and no longer looked at the trembling small sword. Instead, with the 4 pupils in his eyes, he looked at the incoming bolt of lightning and the medicinal spirit Plunder charging towards him. The instant it looked over, Su Ming's body, which had been as tense as a bowstring being drawn, shuddered. Once again, he sensed the origin lightning in his body exuding a chilling and malicious presence, just like the one he had sensed on the small Virescent sword. Under that presence, his lightning seemed to have gathered together as well. Su Ming felt as if he could once again hear that strange panting sound accompanied by the sound of chewing. At that moment, the rumbling of thunder in the forest stopped abruptly. It could be clearly seen that the bolts of lightning before the old man were frozen in midair, unmoving. The old man's expression was ferocious, and his 4 pupils emitted a demonic light. However, at this moment, there was an object that could not be stopped within the lightning that had suddenly frozen in the air. It suddenly charged out of the lightning and headed straight for the old man. The old shaman looked towards that direction, but the moment he looked over, the same disbelief and shock that had appeared when he faced Su Ming's divine sense attack just now burst forth from his eyes once again. Baron Core. The instant the old shaman cried out those 2 words, Spirit Plunder suddenly let out a black light and floated in midair. As the light spread out, it caused the medicinal pill to turn into a void in the world. Waves of power that could take away people's hearts spread out and covered the entire area, causing the old shaman's 4 pupils to feel as if they were being sucked in. He could not move his head, neither could he move his eyes. Divine sense, Baron Core. This is... You're not a berserker. Just who are you? How could you possibly possess the immortal's art from the other worlds and the sacred Baron Core of the shaman tribe? In that slash you made just now, the structure within it clearly contained the power of the totem that we shamans worship. The old man struggled, trying to avert his gaze from Spirit Plunder. As he roared, Spirit Plunder trembled viciously. The black light on it became cloudy, and gradually, besides the hint of my excellence berserker spirit sealed within it, the medicinal pill turned into an eye, and within that eye, there were signs of 2 pupils. However, the old shaman was definitely not someone to be trifled with. As he struggled madly, fine cracks immediately appeared on Spirit Plunder. A barely noticeable glint appeared in the old man's eyes. No one knew what he was thinking, but he continued struggling. All of this happened in an instant. Almost at the instant, the old man's eyes were sucked in by Spirit Plunder, and he looked as if he could not shift his gaze away. Su Ming's body, which looked like a drawn bow, shot out from the hidden red meadow in silence like an arrow released from a bow. Once Su Ming charged out, his entire body was surrounded by black mist that turned into the divine general armor. Lightning swam around his entire body as he moved about in the black mist, looking as if he was filled with an indescribable majesty. His speed when he charged out was incredibly quick, as if he had suddenly appeared out of thin air. He was so quick that with one step, he caused the air to tremble with a bang. As it distorted, a layer of ripples spread out from under Su Ming's feet between the sky and earth. His second step was the same as his first step. He leaped into the air and crossed a distance of 1,000 feet before he fell from midair. The direction he was falling towards was where the old shaman was. Su Ming lifted his right hand, and a long sword made of ice appeared in his hand. That sword was Freezing Sky Sword. The sword in Su Ming's right hand exuded a shocking freezing aura. That freezing aura covered Su Ming's right hand, as if his right hand was connected to the sword. At the same time, under that freezing aura, the shape of freezing sky, sword suddenly changed. It grew larger by size. By the looks of it, it no longer looked like a sword that could be held with one hand, but a 2-handed sword. Su Ming's left hand grabbed the sword as he charged towards the old shaman. Instantly, his left hand was covered in a layer of ice as well. Once he grabbed the sword with both hands, Su Ming's body started freezing at an indescribable speed. In an instant, his entire body was covered in ice, and on his divine general armor, a set of divine general ice armor that had the shape of the armor and the body of ice as its body, appeared on top of his divine general armor. Su Ming's body fell with a bang. He held the sword with both hands and charged towards the old shaman with a presence that made it seem as if he wanted to slash down. At that moment, a crystalline light flashed within Freezing Sky's sword, and an illusion that looked like a berserker mark appeared beside Su Ming. Within that illusion was a strong man. That man also held a sword with both hands. He leaped into the air and slashed down toward the ground. There's only one style in the sword I create. Slash, slash, slash. The arrogant words of the illusory figure formed by the art contained within Freezing Sky sword echoed in Su Ming's ears. Everything else was gone from his eyes. The only thing in his eyes was the old shaman who was getting closer and closer to him on the ground. He slashed down with his sword. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 270. Su Ming used his full strength in that one slash. That one slash made Su Ming's body turn into an ice sculpture. In his mind, the only thing he could think of was the old shaman. Just as Su Ming's body was falling rapidly and the sword was less than dozens of feet away from the old man's head, the old shaman's eyes sparkled and a cruel smile appeared on his lips once again. As that cruel smile appeared, the panic on his face completely disappeared without a trace. So you're a divine general of the Berserker tribe. You're finally out. Looks like this sword is your final move. The old shaman lifted his head swiftly and lifted his right hand, pointing towards the incoming Su Ming. During that instant, his body had indeed been frozen by spirit plunder. He had also been shocked by the appearance of spirit plunder and his divine sense. However, his level of cultivation was much higher than Su Ming's. Even if his body was frozen, it only lasted for an instant. The moment Su Ming rushed out, he had already regained his mobility. He was still struggling because a hint of wariness had arisen in his cunning mind towards all the strange things about Su Ming. He was not wary of Su Ming himself, but of what other methods he might have that seemed strange and shocking to him. He might have sounded disdainful towards Su Ming, but in truth, right from the start of the fight, he had already regarded Su Ming highly. With his age, there were many things that were not as they seemed. Disdain would only appear on the surface, but true regard would not be shown. Instead, it would only erupt when he attacked. As the leader of a tribe, his mind was definitely not empty. Only when he saw Su Ming appear and deliver that slash did he become completely at ease. He believed that he had given Su Ming a chance by not revealing any sort of opening just now. In a situation where he could not move his body, anyone else would bring out their full strength and bring out their strongest attack to deal a heavy blow to their opponent when they had the chance to face someone with a higher level of cultivation than them. Because this might be their only chance. The old shaman believed that even if he was in Su Ming's place, he would do the same. That was why when he saw Su Ming's slash, the old shaman felt at ease. As he smiled darkly, the finger he swung forward was swiftly covered by a layer of black scales. In the blink of an eye, that finger no longer looked like a human's finger, but had turned into the finger of a beast. That fingernail was incomparably black, and the scales on that finger exuded a ghastly and malicious presence. That finger pointed at the air, and with a bang, it crashed into Su Ming's sword slash in midair. Cracking sounds reverberated in the air, and a large amount of cracks appeared on the layer of ice around Su Ming's Freezing Sky sword. As the cracks spread out, Freezing Sky sword immediately shattered and turned back into a normal sword from a two-handed sword. Only then did it stop shattering, but there was still a deep crack on it. The layer of ice covering Su Ming's hands and his entire body also exploded under the power of the old man's finger. When the crack spread through his entire body, all the layers of ice on his body shattered with a bang. The moment the layer of ice on his body shattered, Su Ming once again felt that cold and malicious presence surging into his body. It made him tremble, and at the same time, he heard that strange panting sound accompanied by the sound of chewing once again. He opened his mouth and coughed out a huge mouthful of blood. His face was pale, and as his eyes became dull, his body was rammed into by that huge force. As he tumbled backwards in midair, the divine general armor on his body shattered and healed rapidly, but it was eventually torn to pieces, causing blood mist to erupt from his body. The wound on his chest was torn open, and blood gushed out in all directions. With a bang, Su Ming's body fell to the ground. Behind him was a big tree. When he landed, the power of the tremors caused blood to trickle out of the corners of his mouth once again. His eyes had already lost their light. He struggled to lean against the tree and glared at the old shaman. Su Ming's right hand was casually clenched by his side. No one could see his palm. They could only see the seemingly powerless struggle. The power of the old man's finger might have seemed normal, but in truth, the old man had gathered all his power in that one finger. If Su Ming could fight against that one finger, then he could fight against all of the old man's divine abilities. It might have seemed like just one finger, but in truth, it was all of his power. The great disparity between their levels of cultivation made it impossible for Su Ming to fight against that one finger, especially since the old man's body had not been frozen by spear or plunder. He was only luring Su Ming to appear and attack. The old shaman lowered his right hand slowly. As he did so, his finger rapidly recovered from its scaly appearance. When he completely lowered his hand, it had already returned to the shape of a human finger. A thin wound appeared on the pad of his finger, and a drop of blood seeped out. The old man placed his finger in his mouth and licked away the blood. With a cruel smile on his face, he walked towards Su Ming, who was leaning against the tree. "It's a pity that your master allowed you to come to the land of the shamans alone. I got lucky for nothing. Or else, if you had more time and your level of cultivation was higher, then even if I ran into you, I wouldn't be your opponent. In fact, if you had really escaped this time, then with the shaman tribe fighting to the death against us, it would be even more difficult for me to capture you the next time we meet." Barren core, divine sense, divine general, and even the power of that one slash that is similar to the structure of the shaman tribe. Just how many secrets do you have? The old shaman approached Su Ming slowly. His gaze was like a blade, and once he swept his gaze past Su Ming's body, he was certain that Su Ming had lost his ability to fight back. "That's right. There's also the method you use to hide your presence and your body. These will all belong to me now. Don't be afraid. I won't kill you. How could I bear to kill you? I'll turn you into a shaman puppet." The old man walked to Su Ming's side and crouched down. He looked at Su Ming, and the smile on his face could not hide the ecstasy in his heart. Su Ming's eyes were dull, but there was still an aloof look in them. He wiped away the blood at the corners of his mouth and met the old man's gaze. "This divine eye is very good. Once I turn you into a shaman puppet, I'll keep this gaze." "How did you discover me?" Su Ming asked hoarsely. His voice was incredibly weak. "Once I bring you back to the tribe, you'll naturally know." The old man swung his right hand, and immediately a violent gust of wind charged forth, sweeping up Su Ming's body and bringing him into the sky. At the same time, the old man took a step towards the sky, intending to turn into a long arc and bring Su Ming back to the tribe. Yet at that moment, a brilliant light suddenly burst forth from Su Ming's dull eyes as he was swept up by the violent gust of wind. He had been waiting for this chance. The injuries he suffered were also precisely for this chance. A chance where the old man was completely defenseless against him. A chance where he was completely defenseless against Su Ming. This chance should have never existed. The old man was a cunning old fox. He would definitely not give Su Ming such a chance. Su Ming had to create this chance himself. The moment the light appeared in Su Ming's eyes, he clenched his right hand, and immediately, the white scale that he had been holding in his palm all this while and had been waiting for a chance was crushed. The instant the scale was crushed, the expression of the old shaman who was about to fly away with Su Ming suddenly changed drastically. Before him and around Su Ming's body, an illusionary hand covered in white armor appeared. The appearance of that hand was incredibly sudden, as if it had stretched out from the void and pressed its palm against the completely unguarded old man's chest. The old man let out a shrill scream of pain and coughed out a huge mouthful of blood. There were even some bits of flesh from his organs within that blood. His chest caved in, and as he coughed out blood, he tumbled backwards. His face was filled with hatred, as well as a hint of madness. As he retreated, he threw his head back and roared, then lifted his hands and pressed them against his ears. With that, his chest, which had caved in, began to recover at a bizarre speed. However, the scale that Uncle Master Bai had given him contained the power of a single attack, so it was definitely not that simple. The right hand that stretched out in midair toward the void beside him. With a loud rumble, a crack was torn open in the void, and a burly man wearing white armor walked out from within. The man's face could not be seen clearly. The only thing that could be seen was his aloof gaze. He stared at the retreating old shaman with killing intent. However, his body did not look real. It looked a little like an illusion, and there were wisps of white mist floating around the edges of his body. By Changzai, the old shaman's pupil shrank. That white armor was like a nightmare to him. There was practically no one among the shamans, especially those who lived at the borders of the tribe, who did not know that there was an incredibly terrifying existence on Sky Mist Barrier in the distance. That person was a divine general. He was dressed in white armor, and the number of shamans who died in his hands was innumerable. He was even more terrifying than the berserkers in the Berserker Soul Realm. You're just a divine clone. You can't kill me in the land of the shamans. The old shaman's face was pale. As he retreated, a grave expression that had never appeared on his face before appeared on his face. He groaned in his heart. If he had not received that strike on his chest just now, then he had the confidence that he could fight against this divine clone of Bai Changzai until it disappeared. Yet now, the old man's chest was throbbing in pain. That strike had nearly broken the chi in his heart. So this is that little berserker bastard's final move. Damn it. How could he be so cunning at such a young age? The old shaman did not have the time to pay attention to Su Ming, but his hatred towards him had already burned to the skies. With his experience, he had naturally understood everything. At the same time he was plotting against Su Ming, he had also fallen into Su Ming's trap. He had pretended to have his body frozen to lure Su Ming out so that he could use his final move. Yet similarly, Su Ming had indeed fallen into his trap, but he did not bring out his final move. Instead, he allowed himself to be injured so that the old shaman would lose his chance to defend himself. This child's level of cultivation isn't high, but he has a lot of tricks up his sleeves. He has a barren core, a divine sense, a divine general, and he even has the protection of Bai Changzai's divine clone. He must be a prodigy in the Berserker tribe, someone who will be the center of attention. A person with his status, and a cunning one at that. If I give him enough time, he'll definitely be a disaster to the shaman tribe. Even if I have to risk everything, I'll make this prodigy of the Berserker tribe die here. The moment that thought appeared in the old shaman's head, the person in white armor in the sky took a step towards the old man. Qijian has released a great god's light. It looks pretty interesting. I heard that there are 1,000 lights, and you can change your name. My fellow Taoists who have subscribed to Inverse Immortal or Devil Seeker, hurry up and get them. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 271. The old shaman knew that a prodigy like this young man before him would not easily step into the land of the shamans. If this sort of person died, it would be a huge blow to the Berserker tribe. I once heard from the great patriarch of the South that there are some incredibly outstanding prodigies in the Berserker tribe. They are trained with all their might and are known as the people who have the highest chance of becoming the fourth god of berserkers. I heard that Bai Changzai was one of these prodigies in the past, but due to an accident, he was excluded. Even these people who were excluded have such terrifying power and combat abilities. It's even more so for the prodigies who are in the sequence. This boy before me must be one of them. The old shaman was absolutely certain of his own judgment. He had seen some berserkers before, but none of them were like Su Ming, who had so many divine abilities and arts at the same time. He also had the protection of Bai Chong Zai's divine clone. If anyone else told the old shaman that this sort of prodigy was not in the sequence of the god of berserkers, he would definitely not believe them. If I can turn this person into a shaman puppet of lizard shaman tribe and offer him to the great patriarch of the south, then my status in the god of shaman's temple will increase by leaps and bounds. As these thoughts ran through the old shaman's head, he retreated quickly. His eyes burned brightly as he stared at the person in white armor walking towards him in midair. There was a grave look on the old shaman's face that had never appeared before. Bai Chong Zai's name was like thunder to his ears. All sorts of rumors about this person had been circulating around the shaman tribes near Sky Mist Barrier for many years. Su Ming immediately floated down in midair and brought out most of the medicinal pills. He immediately popped them into his mouth and looked at the old shaman coldly. His eyes flickered slightly. He was thinking about whether he should use the chance to immediately flee and buy more time to avoid the old man's pursuit, or whether he should stay and see whether there was a chance for him to injure the old shaman heavily before Uncle Master Bai's divine clone disappeared. If Uncle Master Bai came personally, then this old shaman would definitely die. But if it's just a divine clone, Uncle Master Bai told me that this could be used for protection when he gave me the scale formed by his divine clone. By the looks of it now, this protection is to hold back my powerful enemy so that I have enough time to run away. Su Ming's eyes sparkled and a freezing glare appeared within them. I'm afraid I won't be able to fulfill my promise with my master. There's only one day left. With my current injuries and this person's pursuit, it'll definitely be difficult for me to return my master alive. If that's the case, Su Ming lifted his head swiftly, and a resolute look appeared on his face. He turned his head back and cast a glance at the world in the distance. That direction was where he had come from, where Sky Mist Barrier was located. At the same time, his master was waiting in that direction. Su Ming had never expected that the appearance of his master in purple robes and the experiences he had gone through would turn into a parting. Things had changed too quickly, so quickly that he did not have time to prepare himself for it. Hefeng was still fusing with the wings of moon in his cave abode in the ninth summit. If Su Ming did not return for a long period of time, then Hefeng would definitely cause trouble if he could not pacify the raging Hefeng. Ziche was also guarding outside his cave abode, waiting for his orders. There was also second senior brother Smile as he looked up at the sky, causing the sunlight to shine on the side of his face. There was also third senior brother's silly smile and his words of thinking that he was very smart. There was also eldest senior brother's silent concern for him and giving him a defensive treasure. There was also Master. Perhaps he would never see him again. Perhaps he did not know when they would meet again. There was also Bai Su. This woman who looked so much like Bai Ling, Su Ming, did not need to show any signs of a change of heart because of her appearance. He could choose to kill her, choose to fight, or choose to forget her. All of these things made Su Ming fall silent. Before his eyes, the image of the boy staring at him with a dumbfounded expression while holding a crude bow in his hands and staring at him blankly before he killed the white-robed split dawn appeared in his mind. One moment of soft-heartedness, one mistake, and the price I have to pay is so great. Su Ming closed his eyes. When he opened them once again, he saw Uncle Master Bai's divine clone approaching the old shaman from a distance. Wisps of white smoke rose from the white armor and floated into the sky. Once they completely dissipated, the person would disappear. Su Ming knew this, and the old shaman also knew it. He retreated quickly to stall for time, but even though he was fast, his chest had suffered a heavy injury that nearly killed him. As he retreated, his speed slowed down, and Uncle Master Bai's body closed in on him like lightning. The distance between the two of them did not decrease because of the old shaman's retreat. Instead, it became shorter. The moment Su Ming opened his eyes and looked over, the distance between the two of them was already less than several hundreds of feet. There was an aloof look in Uncle Master Bai's divine clone's eyes. He lifted his palm, and with a distance of several hundreds of feet between them, he slammed it down on the old shaman who was still trying to stall for time. At the instant the palm landed, the old shaman's pupils shrank once again. A great sense of danger swiftly descended upon him, and during that instant, he came to an abrupt halt. He lifted his hands and pushed them towards Bai Changzai's divinity clone with a roar. At the same time, an innumerable amount of scales that could be seen with the naked eye covered the old shaman's body, causing him to look as if he had turned into a beast. Those scales were pitch black, and a ghastly and evil presence erupted from his body with a bang. His hands turned into claws, and the instant he was about to touch Bai Changzai's divine clone through the air, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes as he stood in the sky. He lifted his right hand and pointed towards the floating spirit plunder. With that one tap, a strange dark light erupted once again from spirit plunder, even though a crack had appeared on it. A pair of pupils that looked like eyes also appeared within the medicinal pill, causing all those who looked at it to feel as if their vision would go blurry. At the same time, that pair of pupils looked towards the old shaman. As the dark light appeared, as the pill absorbed the power of the old shaman's mind, and as the pair of pupils that appeared after absorbing some of the old shaman's mind looked over, the old shaman's lifted hands froze for a moment. That pause was not something he wanted, even if it was just for a moment, even if it was because of this pause that even Su Ming would not be able to seize the chance to counterattack, but Bai Changzai could do it. A shocking roar traveled forth abruptly. As layers of ripples spread out, a violent gust of wind tumbled backwards. More trees and mud on the ground crumbled, and cracks even appeared on the ground. Bai Changzai's divine clone swayed slightly and took a step back. The white threads on his body dissipated even faster, but compared to him, the old shaman situation could only be described as devastating. His hands were a bloody mess. A large amount of scales shattered and fell off his hands. It looked as if a layer of skin had been torn off his hands, revealing the flesh and veins underneath. His chest, which had just recovered, caved in once again. A large amount of blood flowed out of his mouth, and he staggered several hundreds of feet backwards before he managed to stop himself. When he lifted his head, blood trickled down the corners of his mouth. He looked pathetic, and there was rage burning in his eyes. He lifted his head and roared towards the sky. The old shaman's robes had already been torn to shreds, and not much was left. His skinny body looked as if it contained an incredible amount of power. His enraged face and ferocious roar were enough to make all those who saw him tremble in fear. Little berserker bastard, once Bai Changzai's divine clone disappears, I'll turn you into a shaman puppet. It was clear that the old shaman's anger had reached its peak. If Su Ming had not ambushed him just now, he would not have been so badly injured in this fight. His hatred towards Su Ming had already reached a monstrous level, because this was not the first time, but the second time. As the old man continued roaring, Bai Changzai charged forward once again with an aloof expression. In an instant, he closed in on the old shaman. Su Ming watched all of this from the sky in the distance. His gaze was calm, and not a single hint of emotion could be detected within it. He still had one final move that he had not used, and that was the power of his berserker mark. The power of his berserker mark might not be strong to the old shaman, but Su Ming believed that if he used it at the right time, then even if his berserker mark was as light as grass, he might still be able to use it to crush his opponent. As Bai Changzai closed in on him once again, the old shaman could no longer retreat. Not only did he have to fight against Bai Changzai's divine clone, he also had to be wary of Su Ming's attack. This caused a ferocious expression to appear on his face, and with a low growl, he knelt down on the ground. The instant he knelt down, he pressed his bloodied hands against the ground and lifted his head. There was a sinister look in his eyes. He did not kneel down on both legs, but on one. His left leg was stretched straight behind him, and at the same time, it looked incredibly bizarre. It also made him look as if he was using his body to pose like a beast. Almost at the instant he did this, the boundless forest in the vast land fell into a deathly silence. The leaves did not move, the wind did not move, and all the birds and beasts in the forest seemed to have completely died at that instant. A ghastly and sinister presence that far surpassed the old man's spread out from all directions abruptly. Along with that sinister presence was the sound of chewing that could practically be heard even by the ears. Su Ming's heart trembled. He looked towards the ground, and his expression immediately turned serious. As he spread his divine sense outwards, he sucked in a deep breath. That sinister presence came from every single tree in the forest, from every single leaf, from every single inch of mud, from every single bird and beast, from every single rotting beast bone buried under the mud. It came from every single corner of the forest. At that instant, it was as if the entire forest had become one with the old shaman. The totem of the lizard shaman tribe, the sacred beast of the lizard shaman tribe, the great lizard god. I am your servant, and I summon you to descend upon this world that belongs to you, to spit out your fury, and to burn the enemies who offend you into the yellow springs. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 272. As the old man spoke, he lifted his head and let out a roar towards the sky. That roar did not sound like a human's, but more like the roar of a wild beast. At the instant he roared, wisps of black smoke charged at him from all directions in the forest. The speed of that black smoke was so quick that it surpassed the speed at which Bai Changzai was charging at such a close distance. In the blink of an eye, the entire world and the entire forest was filled with that endless black smoke. Within the depths of the forest was the old man's stronghold. At that moment, all the shaman tribe members were kneeling on the ground. They held hands, and with devout expressions on their faces, they surrounded a black statue that was about 100 feet tall and worshipped it continuously. That statue was not of a human, but of a gigantic lizard. That lizard's face was ferocious, and its entire body exuded a brutal and evil presence. It was looking at the sky, and in its gigantic mouth was a child. That child did not seem to be dead and was crying and struggling. That statue looked alive, and the child's expression was also incredibly clear. That pained look, that despairing gaze, and the shrill cries could even be heard. It could also be seen that there was something that was definitely not a shaman's tattoo on the child's face. It was a berserker mark. There were 3 people standing on each of the lizard's 4 limbs under the statue. They were an old man, a woman, and a young man. The 3 people who had been carved were roaring shrilly, and berserker marks could be clearly seen on their faces. There were hundreds and thousands of shamans surrounding the terrifying statue. There were old people, children, women, and even shaman warriors. Their voices fused together, and the instant the sky and earth were surrounded by the black mist, their voices traveled outwards, causing all those who heard them to feel as if there was an endless amount of evil and ghastly air contained in those voices. When those voices fell into their ears, their hearts would race, their hearts would tremble, and chills would rise in their bodies. At the same time, at the spot where Su Ming and the old shaman were fighting, the old man's body became the source of the black mist gathering. As the endless black mist charged towards him, it continuously surrounded the old man's body. Once it enveloped him, it turned into a gigantic lizard. The lizard was lying on the ground, its tail swaying subconsciously. Its eyes were red, and its tongue was sticking out as it roared at the sky. It looked exactly the same as the statue that was being worshipped by hundreds and thousands of shaman tribesmen in the shaman tribe in the forest at that moment. The lizard was several hundreds of feet in size, and as the black fog continued closing in on it, it continued growing in size. The presence spreading out from its body was filled with ghastly malice. As it roared and chewed, the panting Su Ming had heard multiple times appeared once again. At that moment, Su Ming finally knew who that voice belonged to. As the lizard roared, it turned its head around and glared at Bai Changzai's divine clone charging towards it. The instant Su Ming looked over, he immediately noticed that the lizard had 2 pupils in its eyes. The instant it looked at Bai Changzai's divine clone, it swung its gigantic tail, and with a shocking whistle, it tore through the air, causing a dark crack to appear in the air where its tail passed through, and the lizard charged towards Bai Chang's eye. Bai Chang's eye did not stop for even a single moment. At that moment, most of his body had already disappeared, and his existence was practically invisible. The instant the lizard swung its tail, he lifted his right hand and hurled a punch forward. That punch might have seemed normal, but the instant it crashed into the lizard's tail, the lizard took a few steps back with a bang. Its tail was torn, and flesh and blood spilled everywhere. Yet similarly, Bai Chang's eye's body also became more illusionary, as if he was about to disappear at any moment. At that moment, the gigantic lizard leaped forward from the distance. A large amount of black fog gathered in midair, turning into a small hill that was nearly 1,000 feet long, and it charged towards Bai Chang's eye. The power of your divine clone is about to disappear. I like to see how you'll fight against the descent of my tribe's sacred beast. A muffled and hoarse voice tumbled out of the lizard's mouth. As it echoed in the area, it closed in on Bai Chang's eye. Su Ming stood up, and a blood-red light shone in his right eye. He lifted his right hand, and a resolute look appeared on his face. Dark Mountain manifested behind him. Waves of pressure spread out from the 5 summits of Dark Mountain, and as Su Ming pointed forward with his right hand, they charged towards the gigantic lizard. Almost the instant the gigantic lizard closed in on him, Bai Chang's eye's illusionary body lifted his head. A powerful light suddenly appeared in his eyes, and within that light was an indescribable fighting spirit. It was a zealous fighting spirit that was so hot it could burn a person's eyes. The moment that light appeared, Bai Chang's eye's real body, who was sitting quietly and meditating on sky mist barrier far away from this place, also lifted his head at that moment. The same light appeared in his eyes, and his body instantly became thinner. At the same time, in the battlefield in the forest and the land of the shamans, Bai Chang's eye's divine clone turned from an illusionary and transparent state to an existence that seemed as if it had physical form once again. As the zealous fighting spirit erupted from his eyes, he clenched his right fist and charged towards the incoming lizard. A shocking bang reverberated in all directions. Bai Chang's eye's fist landed on the lizard's body, and the lizard's body rapidly disappeared. In the span of a breath, it became almost transparent. The lizard let out a mournful howl. From the place where Bai Chang's eye's fist came into contact with it, it started to crumble. Blood and flesh started to spread and spread towards its entire body. Its enormous body seemed to be unable to endure the attack, and it retreated with a loud bang. Bai Chang's eye's body, which was about to disappear, took a step forward and appeared right before the lizard. He lifted his right hand, but this time he did not use his palm or his fist. Instead, he pointed a finger at the lizard's head. The entire process of that finger being lifted and falling made Su Ming, who was standing not too far away, feel as if the sky had suddenly turned bright in this dark night. This finger was created by me. Its name is White. His calm voice traveled forth, and at that instant, Bai Chang's eye's right index finger seemed to have turned into a white that could chase away the night. It became the brightest spot in the world, and the moment it landed on the gigantic lizard's body, the lizard's body instantly turned white. The lizard's body instantly turned white. As it shone so brightly, booming sounds surged into the sky and reverberated in the air. The lizard's pained screams shook the sky and earth, and at the same time, its body crumbled completely. The first to crumble was not its head, which had been struck by Bai Chang's eye's finger, but its tail. Its tail shattered inch by inch and turned into black smoke that tumbled backwards to reveal the old shaman's left leg. The second to crumble was the lizard's body. As it continued shattering and turning into black mist, the old shaman's bent right leg that looked as if he was kneeling was revealed along with his body. Immediately after, the gigantic lizard's body crumbled, and the damage spread to its front limbs. As it tumbled backwards with a bang, its head exploded at the spot where Bai Chang's eye's finger had pointed. A large amount of black smoke dissipated to reveal the old shaman's head. His pale face coughed out fresh red blood. Once he pointed at the lizard, Bai Chongzai let out a soft sigh, as if he was slightly regretful. His illusionary body could no longer continue existing. He disappeared from the world along with the black mist that appeared when the lizard crumbled. Almost the instant Bai Chongzai disappeared, the dark mountain formed by Su Ming's berserker mark crashed into the old shaman, who coughed out blood with a bang. At the same time, Su Ming charged forward like lightning. A blood-red light shone in his right eye, and an illusionary tribe appeared around the old shaman. That tribe was Dark Mountain Tribe. The moment Dark Mountain Tribe appeared, a blood moon that looked like it was burning appeared in the world around the old shaman. Dark Mountain Blood Moon picture. Once that picture was completely revealed, it looked as if it had turned into a dimension of its own. The pressure that was formed within it caused the heavily injured old shaman to cough out blood once again. His eyes were dull, but there was madness within them. He might be heavily injured, but he was not completely dead yet. In the land of the shamans, especially in the forest where their totem beasts rested, his life force was strong. He would not die so easily. Su Ming closed in on him, and it was as if another line had appeared on the picture of Dark Mountain. He charged towards the old man, and the moment the old man closed in on him with a roar, the two of them crashed into each other. Loud booming sounds reverberated in the air. The 5 summits of Dark Mountain crashed into each other. The grief within all the buildings in Dark Mountain Tribe, and the red light from the blood moon in the sky fused together with Su Ming's body, causing the additional line on the picture of Dark Mountain to become almost perfect. The moment the two of them closed in on each other, Su Ming lifted his right hand and drew one line towards the old man. The instant he drew that line, the entire picture of Dark Mountain started moving. As it twisted, it looked as if it had turned into ink that was stirred up by Su Ming's one line. It fused with that one line and sliced toward the old shaman. At the same time, an ancient and sorrowful feeling appeared within Su Ming's one line. This sort of feeling had not appeared even when he drew his strongest line previously. Only when he fought against Sima Xin had he instinctively drawn that one line had this sort of presence. As that presence appeared, a faint voice that seemed as if it did not exist, but at the same time seemed as if it had always existed. It echoed within Su Ming's one line. When I was born, there was nothing. He lifted that one line. When I was born, the berserkers were already weak. If the heavens were heartless, chaos would descend. Su Ming lifted his head, and there was grief in his eyes. If the heavens were heartless, they would cause Dark Mountain to die. That one line swept up the picture of Dark Mountain and everything about Su Ming, and it sliced through the old shaman's chest. With that one line, Su Ming knew that he had finally created the first style of his picture creation. It contained the years he had lived through, his emotions, and his world. If Sima Xin was here and saw Su Ming's one line, he would definitely be extremely shocked. If he heard the voice contained within that one line, then his shock would reach the skies. Because besides the first line that would appear faintly after the first style of the God of Berserker's transformation was executed, the other lines were completely different from the God of Berserker's song. Because the creation of this God of Berserker's transformation came from a Berserker tribe's war song that the first God of Berserkers had created when he was at the peak of his power. It was also called the God of Berserker's song. Today, he had shamelessly sat down cross-legged with a small bowl in front of him, sang the war song, and asked for recommendation votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 273. With that one stroke, it was as if a ravine that could separate the sky and earth had appeared in the dark sky. Su Ming's right index finger was like the tip of the brush. When he drew a line across the old shaman's chest, his body moved as well. Like a falling leaf during autumn, he drew an arc in the air, turned around, and walked away from the old shaman. The old shaman coughed out blood and staggered a dozen steps backwards. He lifted his head swiftly, and, as he stared at Su Ming, a terrifying long gash appeared on his chest. Blood filled the area and dripped onto the ground, causing the entire place to be immediately filled with a bloody stench. The ghastly white bones within the wound on the old shaman's chest were shattering inch by inch. The organs under his skin and bones had turned into a puddle of blood. The old man's face instantly turned pale. He lowered his head and looked at the long gash on his chest. Slowly, as if he could no longer stand straight, he fell to one knee on the ground and coughed out blood once again. Su Ming stood before him with his eyes closed. In his head, the voice that did not seem to exist during the process of that one stroke reverberated in his head. Such a skillful stroke also proves my guess. You're definitely not an ordinary berserker. Within the territory of the berserker tribe, you're the prodigy who has the highest chance of becoming the god of berserkers. A hoarse voice tumbled out of the old shaman's mouth weakly. Su Ming did not speak. He continued closing his eyes and immersing himself in that one stroke. It's a pity. Even if that one stroke of yours is like the work of nature, the difference in our levels of cultivation makes it difficult for you to kill me, even if I'm heavily injured. The old man knelt on the ground and struggled to lift his head. A dark light shone in his dull eyes, and due to the fatal injury, his body immediately turned black. That black color appeared on the gash on his chest and spread through his entire body. Su Ming opened his eyes and looked at the old shaman calmly. He had to admit that the old man was right. He could not kill this person completely, because at the instant he destroyed the old man's life force, Su Ming sensed that dark and malicious presence once again. That presence had already fused with the old man. He could cut down his body, but he could not destroy his soul, unless he had the same level of cultivation as Bai Chong Zai, or else he would not be able to cut the connection between the lizard beast worshipped by the shaman's totem and the old man. 13 years later, when the sacred beast of lizard shaman tribe forms a new body for me, I will wait for you in the land of the shamans. Our battle has not ended. The old shaman's voice became weaker. His body, which was half kneeling on the ground, had already turned completely black. Wherever that black color passed by, the old man's body would swiftly stiffen up, as if he had turned into a statue. When we meet again, I will... Cruelty and hatred that was carved into his bones appeared in the old man's dull eyes. He stared at Su Ming, and at the instant he closed his eyes, he wanted to say his final words before his body died. Yet before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Su Ming's aloof voice. You will find that your lizard shaman tribe was destroyed 13 years ago, Su Ming stated calmly. There was not a hint of bloodthirst in his words. But when those words fell into the old man's ears, the old man's eyes flew open. The instant the old man opened his eyes, his breathing quickened, as if he was struggling to escape death. Blood trickled down the corners of his mouth, but he could no longer say a complete sentence. Just that one word alone caused his head to stiffen in the midst of his struggles and his entire body to turn into a statue. His body was rooted to the ground, and he was enveloped by a dark and malicious presence. Unless the person's level of cultivation surpassed that of the sacred beast worshipped by lizard shaman tribe, then no one could destroy it, much less move it away. That statue had already become a part of the forest. Su Ming's cold eyes looked at the old man, turning into a statue after he died. His heart was very calm. Once again, he gained an understanding of the strangeness of the shaman tribe. If this old man had been a berserker, then perhaps he would have truly died. Yet now, even though his physical body had been destroyed, his soul was still around. That soul had fused with the forest, and it would only need some time before it manifested once again. Su Ming did not understand this sort of divine ability, but he could feel that this art truly existed. Su Ming brought out some medicinal pills and placed them in his mouth. He took a deep breath and lifted his head to look at the sky. The night sky was no longer dark. Dawn was about to pass, and dawn was about to arrive. In fact, if he looked into the distance, he could see that the horizon in the distance was already starting to brighten up. Shaman tribe, Su Ming mumbled. This trip to the land of the shamans had allowed him to gain a direct understanding of the shaman tribe. This sort of understanding was even more impactful than listening to others and reading about it in ancient scrolls. If it was not for the protective treasure his eldest senior brother had given him, then he would have faced his first death during the day. If he had been surrounded and attacked by the dozen-something shamans, then there would have been no turning back for him if he had hesitated or made a mistake. If it was not for the divine clone formed by Uncle Master Bai's scale, Su Ming knew that the one who would have fallen would have been him. He looked at the old shaman who had turned into a statue. His expression was still the same as it had been during his final moments, the one that looked as if he was about to open his mouth in anger. This person could be said to be the strongest enemy Su Ming had ever met. Su Ming touched his chest. The injuries there had become even more severe, but with a large amount of medicinal pills to regulate his breathing, he could somewhat suppress the injuries. There's still one more day. With my speed, I won't be able to go back. Su Ming lifted his head and looked in the direction where his master was. He fell silent for a moment. I'll be half a day late. Master said I'll wait for 3 days. Su Ming closed his eyes. He was now faced with a choice. One of the choices was to leave the forest as soon as possible. Even if he did not make it in time, perhaps his master would still be waiting for him there. The second choice was Su Ming opened his eyes swiftly, and determination as well as ruthlessness appeared within them. He turned his head around and looked towards the deeper parts of the forest. If I go back now, I'll have questions in my heart. He calmly turned around. Once he put away his belongings, he turned into a long arc and charged into the forest. As he charged forward, he disappeared from the place. His direction was clear. He was heading towards Lizard Shaman Tribe, which was located deep within the forest. Su Ming might not know the exact location of Lizard Shaman Tribe, but he had lived in the forest since he was young. If there was a tribe with more than hundreds of people in the forest, then there would definitely be traces of them around the area. Perhaps it would be difficult for other people to find a tribe hidden in the forest through these traces, but it was not difficult for Su Ming, especially since he had the divine sense. Because of that, it made it even easier for him. This tribe is definitely not a big tribe. There aren't many powerful berserkers in there, and I've killed quite a number of them. Their old shaman is also dead. If I don't end this now, then I won't be able to accept it. Killing intent flashed in Su Ming's eyes. He had no enmity with this tribe, but because he was soft-hearted, he nearly died. Not long after Su Ming left, a rustling sound suddenly traveled into the silence beside the old shaman who had turned into a statue on the battlefield. That sound sounded like a person walking towards them slowly from the distance. Before long, a person walked out of the forest. That person was dressed in purple, and he was Tian Xiezi. Tian Xiezi's face was calm as he walked towards the old shaman who had turned into a statue. Once he lifted his head and looked in the direction Su Ming had left, his gaze fell on the old shaman statue, and a thick wave of killing intent appeared in his eyes. How dare you hunt down my disciple? Since you sharpened his sword for him, I'll grant you death. Tian Xiezi lifted his right hand and patted the statue lightly. The statue trembled with a bang, and countless cracks appeared on it. It turned into a large amount of shards that spun in the air, and a faint shrill scream of pain reverberated in the air. The moment his palm landed, Tian Xiezi broke the connection between the old shaman and the sacred lizard in the forest. He destroyed his soul and truly died. And you worm, you're just a manifestation of the will that was born after you were worshipped by a small shaman tribe. Do you really think that you're the sacred beast of the shaman tribe? Tian Xiezi spoke languidly towards the air, then lifted his right foot and stomped on the ground. The instant his foot landed, a huge gust of wind stirred up in the forest. As the ground trembled, shrill screams of pain traveled forth. Su Ming could not hear those sounds as he charged through the forest. Only the creator of all of this, Tian Xiezi, could hear them. As Tian Xiezi's footsteps landed and the mournful wails echoed, countless wisps of black qi appeared out of thin air. The wisps of black qi gathered in front of Tian Xiezi and formed a giant lizard. The lizard's body was indistinct. Its originally savage eyes were filled with terror, fear, and pleading as it looked at Tian Xiezi. Its body trembled, and it lowered its head to worship Tian Xiezi. Tian Xiezi remained silent for a moment before he let out a cold harumph. The lizard shaman tribe worshipped you quite a lot, huh? Not only did they give you the form of a will, they even gave you intelligence. I can spare your life. Stay here, and when you meet my disciple again, you must follow him and protect him with your life. If you disobey, I'll tell you to go back to where you came from. Tian Xiezi's words were calm, but when they fell into the illusionary lizard's ears, it made the creature shudder. Gratitude and obedience appeared in its eyes. Get lost. Tian Xiezi waved his arm and walked in the direction Su Ming had left. The illusionary lizard's body turned back in a black mist and crawled into the ground, disappearing without a trace. Su Ming charged through the forest. Occasionally, he would stop to observe the traces around him and change his direction based on what he found. The sky became brighter, and when the sun was at its brightest, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He had found the lizard shaman tribe. It was right before him. Su Ming floated forward like a ghost, but when he was tens of thousands of feet away from the lizard shaman tribe, he suddenly came to a halt. He saw the back of a person standing before him. Moss. Master. Su Ming was stunned. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 274. The person standing before him was dressed in purple. That familiar robe and that familiar presence caused Su Ming's heart to tremble. A feeling as if he had just seen a family member instantly spread through his body and soul. As the word master left his mouth, Tian Xiezi turned around. Even though his expression was still gloomy, the corners of his mouth curled into a faint smile. You've suffered, Tian Xiezi, he said softly as praise appeared in his eyes. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath. He had originally thought that it would be many years before he would meet his master again, or perhaps he would never see him again. He did not expect that Tian Xiezi would appear right outside Lizard Shaman Tribe. Master! Su Ming touched the wound on his chest and shook his head. Go and do what you think you should do. I'll wait for you here. Let's go home together. Tian Xiezi looked at Su Ming, and the praise in his eyes became stronger. Su Ming remained silent for a moment before he wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed towards Tian Xiezi. He did not stop and charged towards Lizard Shaman Tribe behind Tian Xiezi. Tian Xiezi looked at Su Ming's back, and anticipation appeared on his face. Fourth, what will you choose? Tian Xiezi mumbled. As Su Ming charged forward, a huge stronghold appeared in front of him. It was surrounded by an innumerable amount of fences formed by the ancestral city of giant trees. Cheers and laughter could be heard coming from within the stronghold. Among those voices were those of the elderly, children, women, and shaman warriors. Those voices caused Su Ming's footsteps to slow down. He looked at the village. He might not be able to see what was inside, but he could feel the joy between him and his tribe members in the village. If I had been captured by that old shaman, then, when he returned to the village, perhaps there would have been even more cheers and laughter. Su Ming sighed softly. He did not know whether what he was about to do next was right, but he knew that in this world where the strong preyed on the weak, he had already tasted the price of being soft-hearted. In silence, Su Ming walked towards the village. At the instant he was several thousands of feet away from the village, piercing howls immediately came from within. That shrill howl was like a warning. At the same time, it reverberated in the village, for people rushed out from within the village. The instant they saw Su Ming, their expressions changed drastically. Su Ming was not unfamiliar with these four people. They were the ones who had been saved by the old shaman after he delivered his strongest attack. The instant he saw these four people, killing intent appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He leaped up, and, as the small virescent sword shone at the center of his brows, he turned into a green arc and charged forward. He was as quick as lightning, and the instant the four people closed in, a bell chime suddenly reverberated within Su Ming's body. The bell chime was like the sound of a death knell. As the ripple spread out, a green light flashed, and the small sword pierced through one of the people's chests at lightning speed. It brought with it a mouthful of blood and a scream of pain, and at the same time, the curtain of the massacre was lifted. After a moment, there were 4 corpses lying on the ground outside the village. Su Ming's body was stained with blood. He walked forward calmly, and the instant the village fell into a state of dead silence, he slashed down on the village's gate. A loud bang reverberated in the air, and the gate immediately crumbled, turning into an endless amount of shards that tumbled backwards. As a large amount of dust was stirred up, Su Ming walked into the village. At the instant he entered, 5 people charged towards him and fought against him in the dust. Booming sounds continued, ringing in the air, but Su Ming did not stop for even a single moment. The instant he came into contact with the 5 people, black smoke surrounded his entire body, and the divine general armor manifested, blocking their attacks head-on. At the same time, green light shone and lightning spread out. When Su Ming walked past the dust that had been stirred up by the collapse of the village gate, 5 corpses fell behind him. Almost the moment these 5 people died and Su Ming walked into the village, nearly 100 arrows flew towards him. However, when they were several dozens of feet away from Su Ming, they stopped one by one and exploded into powder. These arrows did not come from the hands of the shaman warriors, but from the normal tribe members in the village. Those normal tribe members glared at Su Ming with blood-red hatred in their eyes. Even if the arrows shattered, more arrows flew towards him. Not only did Su Ming see hatred in their eyes, he also saw a will to fight to the death. At that moment, with a low growl, a man walked out from one of the tents in the village. That man was half naked, and with one swift step, he charged towards Su Ming. Soon after, a dozen-something shaman warriors charged towards Su Ming from all corners of the village. Su Ming fell silent and closed his eyes. He lifted his right hand and drew a line in the air. That line was like the might of heaven. The moment it fell, the man in the lead shuddered and was immediately torn to shreds. His head flew into the air. The remaining people all fell from the sky with shrill screams after Su Ming drew that line with his eyes closed. With a loud bang, they fell to the ground dead. Su Ming opened his eyes and swept his gaze across the village. This was not a big village. There were a lot of tents, and there were hundreds of men and women. All of them were staring at him silently, with hatred burning in their eyes. Their gazes made Su Ming's heart clench in pain. Among those gazes were old people, children, women. There were quite a number of people who continued shooting arrows even though they knew it was impossible. Even when those arrows shattered time and time again, it did not stop them. Su Ming walked forward calmly. His divine sense spread out and enveloped the entire tribe. Once it swept through the area, he lifted his right hand, and the small virescent sword charged towards several tents. It pierced through them one by one and came back with fresh blood in its wake. Wherever it went, there were shaman warriors. However, these people were unconscious due to their injuries and could not go out. When the small virescent sword returned to Su Ming's side, there were no longer any warriors left in the lizard shaman tribe. The remaining hundreds of people were all normal tribe members. Yet even if they were normal tribe members, the hatred in their eyes and the arrows that were shot towards Su Ming showed a hint of madness towards him. Faint sounds of crying traveled into the air. Those were the cries of women and some of the children who were afraid. Most of them were silent tears that fell from the corners of the tribe members' eyes as the ground was filled with the corpses of the shaman warriors. Su Ming looked at these people quietly. He understood the hatred in their eyes. However, if Su Ming had not come here in this manner and had been captured by the old shaman, stepped onto the ground, and turned into a shaman puppet, then not a single one of these people would have looked at him with pity. Instead, they would have looked at him with a cruel excitement and would have cheered for him. This was the sorrow of those who did not have a sense of belonging in a war between two races. Either they did not join in, or they had to bear with this sorrow. The arrows didn't stop. There was a young man whose eyes were bloodshot. His left hand had already been cut by the bowstring, and blood was dripping down. However, it was as if he didn't know pain. He gritted his teeth and pulled the bowstring again and again, shooting arrows, even though those arrows couldn't hurt the enemy he wanted to kill. Su Ming's eyes eventually fell on the boy. He looked at the boy and walked towards him. When the boy saw Su Ming walking towards him, he let out a loud roar and rushed towards Su Ming with his bow and arrow in hand. The determination to die appeared on his face. It was a madness that made him want to take a bite out of his enemy, even if he died. Yet when he rushed to Su Ming's side, he could not help but stop under Su Ming's gaze. The awe-inspiring might contained within that gaze caused him to be unable to control his body, and he could only stop before Su Ming. Tears fell from his eyes, and within those tears was madness and hatred. Su Ming looked at the boy and lifted his right hand to wipe away the tears on his cheeks. "It shouldn't have been like this," Su Ming said softly. "I saved you and killed that snake. There's no enmity between us." The boy glared at Su Ming, and the hatred in his eyes turned into venomous hatred. "Why did you report this? Is it just because I'm a berserker and you're a shaman?" Su Ming looked at the boy and wiped away the tears at the corner of his other eye. "I was soft-hearted once, and I paid a great price for it. This is because I was wrong. I had to accept this mistake that was etched into my bones. It's the same for you, because you were wrong," Su Ming stated calmly. The boy trembled, and confusion appeared in his eyes. More tears fell down his cheeks, and Su Ming saw a hint of regret in his eyes. "It shouldn't have been like this." Su Ming looked at the boy and turned around to walk towards the crumbling gate of the village. When he walked out of the gate, he heard the boy's shrill roar coming from behind him. That roar was filled with hatred, madness, and deep regret. Su Ming did not turn his head back. He walked out of the village and into the forest to Tian Xiezi's side. "Master, let's go home." There was a hint of fatigue in Su Ming's voice. "I thought you chose to come back here because you wanted to destroy this tribe." Tian Xiezi looked at Su Ming with a calm expression. "I can sense Master's aura on him." Su Ming remained silent for a moment. He did not look at Tian Xiezi, but instead looked in the direction of sky mist barrier and spoke tiredly. "I was the one who woke him up. This is the shaman tribe. They have a blood feud with us berserkers. If you still don't understand, then you will pay this price with your life during Sky Mist Shaman Hut." Tian Xiezi closed his eyes and spoke languidly. Su Ming fell silent. "With your own power, you chased after Split Dawn and took his head. This is praiseworthy. When you were ambushed in the forest, you did not panic in the face of a dozen shamans. You calmed yourself down and split them up to kill them. This is praiseworthy. When you ran into a powerful warrior, you used your strongest attack to tear through the sky. You did not linger in the fight. You knew your limits and ran away. This is praiseworthy. When you chased after someone, you knew not to use brute force to escape. You judged the situation and turned around to fight. You did not fear the strong. This is praiseworthy. When you worked together with Bai Chong Zai's divine clone, you understood your own first style. This is a great harvest. But you were merciful and let that boy go for the first time. This is a mistake. You knew everything and returned to this place, but you still let that boy go. This is a great mistake. I am your master. I will correct your mistake for you." Tian Xiezi turned around and walked towards the shaman tribe. "Master," Su Ming looked at Tian Xiezi. He might look tired, but his eyes were calm. "This is my creation." Tian Xiezi's footsteps faltered. "Happy Dragon Boat Festival, everyone. Eat more rice dumplings. Remember to help me eat one. Haha." Chapter 275. Your Creation. Tian Xiezi turned around and looked at Su Ming with bright eyes. He might be tired, but his eyes were as calm as water. He looked at his fourth disciple and waited for his answer. Su Ming cast a glance in the direction of Lizard Shaman tribe and said slowly, "Master, this is my creation. I don't know much about eldest senior brother's creation, but I can see that his skill is a fusion of ice and fire. Ice is cold and fire is hot. They are like two extremes. This fusion does not make sense and is difficult for others to understand. But once he fuses with something that counters him, he can clear his mind. This is my eldest senior brother's creation. Su Ming averted his gaze from Lizard Shaman tribe and looked at Tian Xiezi. Tian Xiezi was silent for a moment before he met Su Ming's gaze. Your eldest senior brother's creation is the sound of rustling. Rustling is noise, and closing is silence. Is also the fusion of two extremes. Closing is ice, and rustling is fire. It's the same, Su Ming said calmly. As for second senior brother, he has a pair of hands of creation. During the day, he creates life in plants, and at night, he destroys their life and uproots them. Su Ming mumbled, and his voice echoed in the forest. These are also two extremes. They do not make sense. Creation and destruction are like life and death. Second senior brother's creation is the fusion of life and death, the fusion of creation and destruction. Tian Xiezi's face was calm, but his heart was shaken. He did not expect that Su Ming would have such an epiphany, even though he had not been in the Ninth Summit for a long time. Continue, Tian Xiezi said slowly. Third senior brother is also practicing two extremes. His thoughts do not make sense. He is fusing between reality and illusion. Reality is reality, and illusion is a dream. Reality and illusion are trying to fuse together. He is wandering between waking and dreaming. If he truly wakes up one day, his creation will be complete. Su Ming's gaze fell on Tian Xiezi once again, and he asked softly, Master, am I right? This is indeed the path your three senior brothers want to take. Praise appeared in Tian Xiezi's eyes, and he nodded. It's not. Su Ming's voice was soft, but firm. Tian Xiezi frowned. This is the path Master wants them to take. Su Ming shook his head. Because they can't be understood, and because they have fused everything to their extremes, the people of the Ninth Summit are all weirdos in the eyes of outsiders. It was normal for the eldest senior brother to be in seclusion all year round because he rarely went out. Others didn't know much about him. Second senior brother planted flowers in the day and destroyed them at night. This kind of behavior could no longer be explained with the word strange. Third senior brother led a befuddled life, often murmuring to bring people into his dreams. Those who didn't understand him would inevitably think that he was crazy. Because this doesn't conform to common sense, because it's different from others, because it's not understood, it became the praise in Master's eyes. It became the evil in Master's name, Tian Xiezi. When Su Ming said these words, he paused. Tian Xiezi was silent. Master, this is yours, not mine. The master and disciple remained silent for a moment in the forest before Su Ming said softly, Then what are you pursuing? Tian Xiezi stared at Su Ming, and a complicated look appeared in his eyes. I don't know. Su Ming shook his head. Once he cast a glance in the direction of Lizard Shaman tribe once again, his gaze fell on the sky. If there's really such a thing, then I think it should be to open my eyes. Su Ming closed his eyes. What do you want to see when you open your eyes? Tian Xiezi looked at Su Ming, and the complicated look in his eyes became stronger. As he looked at Su Ming, he felt as if he was looking at himself in the past. He might have spoken differently, but he had the same expression on his face when he faced his master. Perhaps it's to see a world that others can't see. Su Ming opened his eyes, and a bright light shone in them. Within that light was persistence, determination, as well as a desire to pursue his goal. Why do I want to see a world that others can't see? Tian Xiezi asked calmly. There was a strange tone in his voice that echoed in the area. Su Ming fell silent. After a long while, he looked at Tian Xiezi. To see myself, my true self. Su Ming mumbled. A smile appeared on Tian Xiezi's face. That smile grew wider, and eventually, he threw his head back and laughed. His laughter echoed in the forest and floated into the sky. Very well. What you're pursuing is no longer the evil that I'm pursuing. You want to open your eyes and see a world that others can't see, and that means that you're the only one awake when everyone else is drunk. This is not evil. This is a state that is above evil. This is a life that I don't know the name of. Su Ming, if you really do it one day, then you must be prepared. Perhaps you won't be able to live with this intoxicated world anymore, because you're awake. A shudder ran through Su Ming's body. He looked at Tian Xiezi and nodded. Let's go. I'll take you home. Tian Xiezi patted Su Ming's shoulder and waved his arm. A violent gust of wind appeared out of nowhere and swept up the master and disciple before they charged into the sky and disappeared into the vast sky of the land of the shamans. But before we go home, I'll take you to some places. Once you see them, you'll gain a deeper understanding of the blood feud between the shamans and the berserkers. It'll also prepare you to open your eyes and see more of the world. Tian Xiezi's voice echoed in the sky before it gradually faded away. Within Sky Mist Barrier, at the edge of the land of the berserkers in the land of South Morning, there was a mountain range that rose and fell. The sky distorted, and Tian Xiezi and Su Ming walked out of those distorted ripples. Look at the land carefully. Tell me what you see. Tian Xiezi looked at the mountain range beneath him, and his voice traveled into Su Ming's ears. Su Ming still looked tired, but his injuries were already under control. He looked at the place Tian Xiezi was pointing at. There was a mountain range there, and there was nothing strange about it at first glance. The only thing that made it seem a little desolate was that the mountain was bare. There was not a single hint of plant on it. Su Ming frowned. He descended from midair and stood on the bare mountain. He crouched down and grabbed a handful of sand from the mountain. When he brought it to his mouth, a brilliant glint appeared in his eyes. There's a faint stench of blood. Su Ming lifted his head and looked at his surroundings. The moment his gaze swept past the area, his eyes suddenly focused on one spot. It was a call on the mountain. It was desolate, and the sand gave off a desolate air. With uncertainty in his heart, Su Ming walked to the colonel gradually. A grave look appeared on his face. He lifted his right hand and pressed it against the ground through the air. Instantly, a huge gust of wind howled and swept up the sand around him, turning it into a vortex. As it spread outwards, the sand in the area was blown away layer by layer. Some broken wooden stakes and shattered stone bowls that were buried under the sand were revealed. There were also human bones that had already turned brown due to the passage of time. The ground was filled with broken bones. Su Ming's gaze swept past the broken bones around him. Some of the bones were thinner, and some were thicker. Eventually, Su Ming's gaze fell on a bone that was more complete. It was a child's bone. Only the upper half of his body was damaged. The child's hand seemed to have been holding on to something before he died, but it was no longer there. Su Ming shuddered. He lifted his head swiftly and looked at Tian Xiezi in the sky. This was once a tribe. It was a rather large tribe. There were about 700 people there, and there were less than 40 berserkers among them. The rest were either normal tribesmen or young children. 300 years ago, Sky Mist Barrier was lost during the battle, and some shamans entered the land of the berserker tribe. This tribe was one of them that was destroyed by them. Men, women, old, and young were all brutally killed. Su Ming lowered his head and looked at the child's bones. He fell silent. Head east from here. On the way, you'll see more than 40 tribes that were destroyed like this. Some of them were destroyed 300 years ago, and some of them were destroyed even longer than that. Su Ming took a step forward, and he was so quick that he charged towards the east in an instant. Tian Xiezi followed behind him and did not speak along the way. He watched as Su Ming charged forward and walked past the tribes that had been reduced to ruins. As time passed by, every single time Su Ming walked past a wasteland, his expression would become darker. When an entire day passed by, Su Ming stood on a plain. The sky was filled with dark clouds. As he stood there, the grass grew lush under his feet, but it could not hide the bloodshed and slaughter that had once taken place in this place. This is just a part of it. Tian Xiezi walked to Su Ming's side and spoke calmly. There are plenty of tribes that were massacred like this within Sky Mist Barrier in the land of South Morning. Over the past thousands of years, the shamans have become sworn enemies with them, and they will not rest until they die. Su Ming closed his eyes and spoke softly after a long while. The shamans are very strong. That's the truth. Tian Xiezi turned his head around and looked at the land in the distance. Then this so-called sky mist shaman hunt. Su Ming hesitated for a moment. The shamans call this event that happens once every 10 years berserker hunt. The person who answered Su Ming was Tian Xiezi, who was standing beside him. Su Ming's pupils shrank. Those two simple words exuded a bloodthirsty air, and it was not something that could be replaced by killing 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, or even 10,000 people. This was a slaughter that contained the passage of time, and when those two words were spoken and heard, they would be able to sense a wave of murderous aura. If we made a promise to kill once every 10 years, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he looked at Tian Xiezi. Tian Xiezi looked at Su Ming, and after a long while, he nodded. This is a game. A game. Su Ming looked at the plains under his feet and smiled. The reason why both sides of the game have been like this for thousands of years, and even longer, is because they have their own goals. As for what their goals are, you can search for the answer yourself. Now, tell me, do you still want to join Sky Miss Shaman Hunt? Tian Xiezi turned around and walked toward the sky. Su Ming stood there for a moment before he turned into a long arc and arrived beside his master, who was waiting in midair. I will join Sky Mist Battle. With the identity of a member of the land of South Morning, I will join this game in other people's eyes. Su Ming's voice was calm. He turned into two long arcs with Tian Xiezi and flew towards Freezing Sky Clan. They went further and further away until they disappeared from the world. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 276. To all the people in the 9 summits of the Great Frozen Plains in Freezing Sky Clan, 5 days went by, as usual. During these 5 days, nothing major happened. It was the same as usual. The sun continued to rise and set. The moon remained bright at night, and the cold wind was the same as usual. There was no difference, no change. Even if they isolated themselves for 5 days, they did not increase their power by much. These 5 days were no different from the other days of the year to most people. Tian Meng of the 7th Summit sat on a big rock near the top of the mountain. The wind lifted her black hair. To her, these 5 days were just a period of meditation. Ziyin and Hansong each had their own matters to attend to. These 5 days passed by quickly. Nothing changed. Han Fei Zi of the 4th Summit was immersed in her isolation, quietly making the final preparations for Sky Miss Shaman Hunt. With her master's help, she was already close to transcendence. Perhaps in just a few days, she would be able to reach it. Sima Xian of the 1st Summit sat in his cave abode as usual during these 5 days. Occasionally, he would wake up, and the dark look in his eyes was no different. Most of the people were like this, and it was the same for the 9th Summit. Hu Zi lived his life in a drunken stupor. During these 5 days, he drank, dreamed, snored like war drums, woke up happily, and went to sleep happily. Second senior brother planted his plants during the day and wandered about like a ghost at night. To him, 5 days passed by very quickly. To eldest senior brother, 5 days passed by like the blink of an eye. If he was the slightest bit careless in that quiet isolation, it would be more than just 5 days. However, there were still a few people who felt that these 5 days felt like a year. Ziche was one of them. On the first day, he was very calm, but that calmness turned into uncertainty after 3 days. It had been 3 days since he saw Su Ming. More importantly, he could sense that there was no longer any presence in the cave abode. It was as if Su Ming was no longer there. When the 4th day arrived, that feeling became even more obvious. He had a vague feeling that something was off. Su Ming rarely isolated himself in the past. Even when he was meditating, he would occasionally walk out and stand on the platform to look at the horizon in the distance. Yet now, for days had passed, and Su Ming still did not appear. This made Ziche feel that something was off. It was especially so when during these 5 days, Besides Che, there was also Bai Su waiting outside Su Ming's cave abode. She had been waiting here for several days and had never left. If it were not for Che stopping her, she would have rushed into Su Ming's cave a long time ago. On the fifth night, Che sat down cross-legged with a frown on his face. His gaze would occasionally fall towards Su Ming's cave abode. His heart was filled with questions, but he did not dare enter without reason. Just how long are you going to stop me? I want to see Su Ming. Just as Che was feeling puzzled, a voice that made him feel resigned reached his ears. It was Bai Su. She was dressed in purple and sat across Che. There was determination in her wild beauty. Su Ming, it's already been 5 days and you still haven't seen me. Could it be that seeing my face is such a huge shock to you? Even if you don't want to see me, don't tell me you'll never walk out of the cave. Unless I die, I will never give up. The dark cave abode was as calm as ever. Not a single sound could be heard. This calmness made Bai Su's determination become even more resolute. Che could no longer be bothered to talk to Bai Su. He felt that this woman was a little unreasonable. If she continued pestering him like this, it would only make him frustrated. Bai Su's heart was filled with bitterness. She could naturally see Che's expression and knew that if she continued pestering him like this, she would definitely make him hate her, but she had to do it. At that moment, a cold gust of wind blew past them and brought with it a large amount of snow. Once the wind passed, the area was still silent. However, Che did not notice, and neither did Bai Su notice that a person had walked into the cave abode with the wind and sat down cross-legged inside. Tianxie had also returned to the top of the 9th summit. He had chosen to isolate himself once again, and the color of his robes gradually changed. Huzi did not notice Tianxie and Su Ming's return. He was still snoring away. Second senior brother floated in the air like a ghost. Once he lifted his head and cast a glance at Tianxie, he continued searching for his other self, who represented destruction. A gentle gaze flashed faintly in the layer of ice where eldest senior brother isolated himself, then disappeared without a trace as he closed his eyes once again. Su Ming sat cross-legged in the cave abode. The dark cave abode gave him a familiar feeling, as if it was his home. He took a deep breath and looked at his surroundings. To others, these 5 peaceful days would pass by very quickly, but to Su Ming, it was a huge change that could practically turn the sky and earth upside down. It was an experience that a normal person would rarely encounter in their entire lives, along with a strong sense of life-threatening danger. To Su Ming, these 5 days felt as if 5 years had passed, or even longer. During these 5 days, he saw his master's junior brother and saw the shocking battle between the two of them. However, the scenes of that battle in his head had already become a blur, and he could not remember it too clearly. During these 5 days, he saw the old Sun maker play a song, and his mind gained an epiphany. He gained an understanding towards changes of heart, and he made his own decision. During these 5 days, he went to the land of the shamans and saw his master's powerful power. He saw the spirit medium, saw the strange split dawn, and even saw the gigantic sacred beast, the golden rock, that was 10,000 feet tall. During these 5 days, he killed one of the split dawn, but he also went through a life and death chase. During these 5 days, he completed the first style of his picture creation and heard his own god a berserker song. During these 5 days, he went through a metamorphosis from the inside out. Fight, cut, forget. Su Ming lifted his head in the darkness and looked towards the area outside the cave abode. Under the gentle moonlight, the girl's figure seemed to be there. There are 3 ways to deal with a change of heart. The simplest is to cut. Kill the girl, and everything will end. The hardest is to forget. If I forget Bai Ling, then Bai Su won't be able to move my heart. As for fighting, it won't solve my problem. Bai Su's voice traveled into Su Ming's ears from outside the cave abode. Her voice was incredibly clear in the quiet night. This is Master's method, not mine. Su Ming's gaze was calm as he looked at the moonlight outside the cave. A change of heart is triggered by a person or an event. To cut, to fight, to forget. These 3 methods are all considered to be escapes. Since it's already here, then let it continue existing. Let me face it, Su Ming mumbled softly to himself. The heart changes because of stubbornness. Why can't I calm down because of stubbornness? Su Ming closed his eyes. After a moment, he opened them slowly and brought out his drawing board, flipping it to the front. Ever since he had drawn that scene, he had not looked at the front. Now that he looked at it, it was blank, but in his eyes, his own figure appeared on the drawing board. His foot, which he was about to lift, was entangled by grass. A smile appeared on his face. He looked at the grass and lifted his head slowly. Ziche, let her in. Ziche was hesitating and making guesses outside the cave abode. He had a feeling that there was something off about Su Ming's cave abode over the past few days. Just as Bai Su's voice was still echoing in his ears, Su Ming's voice suddenly floated out of the cave abode. The moment his voice echoed in the air, Ziche's heart trembled and all the distracting thoughts in his head immediately disappeared. He got up and bowed towards the cave abode, obeying respectfully. A glint appeared in Bai Su's eyes. With one move, she walked past Ziche and charged towards the cave abode. Ziche followed behind her, and the two of them walked into Su Ming's cave abode. Due to the darkness outside, the cave abode was even darker. Once they entered, they could only faintly see Su Ming's figure. It was even harder to see him clearly since Su Ming was sitting at the back. Yet even so, the moment Ziche stepped into the cave and saw Su Ming, his heart still let out a roar. He saw Su Ming's gaze. His gaze might seem the same as 5 days ago, but Ziche could clearly feel a strong sense of pressure. To him, the Su Ming before him was completely different from 5 days ago. He could not put his finger on what was different about him, but the pressure made Ziche feel as if he was facing Su Ming's second senior brother, or even his master. If the Su Ming from 5 days ago was still a little naive, then now, he no longer had that naivety. He was like a ferocious beast that had walked out of death's door after going through a storm. Ziche's heart trembled, and he quickly lowered his head to bow respectfully. Greetings, Master. Ziche's breathing quickened slightly. His heart pounded against his chest, and the pressure became stronger. Just what happened to him during these 5 days? Ziche did not dare lift his head. As his heart trembled, he became perplexed. Ziche was not the only one who felt this way. Bai Su felt the same. The moment she saw Su Ming's gaze, her heart trembled, and her originally aggressive footsteps slowed down against her will, eventually coming to a stop. Bai Su greets Uncle Master Su. Bai Su's heart raced against her chest. Su Ming's calm gaze made her fall into a daze at that instant. It was as if the person sitting before her was not Su Ming, but Sima Xian or Tian Lanming. In fact, he was neither of them, but a powerful berserker from her father's generation. That gaze seemed to be able to make a person's mind calm down, even if they were extremely angry. Su Ming looked at Bai Su, at this face that was exactly the same as Bai Ling's, and nodded his head. From tomorrow onwards, you can come to my place anytime you want. I'll teach you how to draw. I won't stop you anymore. Bai Su's mind was in chaos. She lifted her head and looked at Su Ming blankly, unable to understand why he would suddenly change his mind. But I have a request, Su Ming said flatly. Bai Su's breathing froze and wariness appeared on her face. Su Ming left a terrible impression on her. If it was not for Sima Xian, she would not have come into contact with him like this. When she saw Su Ming suddenly agreeing to it, Bai Su was already puzzled to begin with. When she heard his request, her eyes slowly turned cold. Tell me, as long as I can do it, I'll do it. When you come to see me, wear a long white robe. Don't let your hair down. Use a red string of grass to tie it up. Turn it into 2 small braids by your ears. The rest of your hair is tied behind your head. Decorate your forehead with some sparkling crystals. When the snow on the ground shines on them, they will shine with a piercing light. When you smile, show your canine teeth. Bai Su frowned. Since you want to turn into the person in my memories, then go and dress up like this, Su Ming said slowly and closed his eyes. Bai Su remained silent for a moment before she let out a cold harumph and left. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 277. Once Bai Su left, Ziche bowed respectfully towards Su Ming and quickly left the place. When he was hundreds of feet away from the cave abode, he let out a huge sigh of relief and turned his head back to look at Su Ming's cave abode. Respect appeared in his eyes. He's different. Ziche could not put his finger on it either. It was just a feeling. Under the night sky, Su Ming breathed calmly and meditated quietly in his cave abode. The injuries on his body were already under control, and as he adjusted his breathing, he gradually recovered. When dawn arrived, Su Ming opened his eyes. There was no brilliance in his eyes, only clarity. He looked at the dark night outside the cave abode. Cold wind blew in, lifting a few strands of his hair and causing them to float on his face. The battle in the land of the shamans. Su Ming lowered his head and looked at his hands. A contemplative look appeared on his face. In his head, the scenes of him chasing after one of the split dawns to the moment he walked out of Lizard Shaman tribe slowly replayed in his head. I made a few mistakes in this battle, Su Ming mumbled. He lifted his left hand and brought out his drawing board. He lifted his right hand and started drawing on the back of the drawing board. Gradually, pictures appeared on the drawing board as Su Ming looked at it. The first thing that appeared was a small hill in the dense forest. He stood at the top of the hill and charged down the hill. The split dawns he was chasing were also closing in on him from the foot of the hill. I might have paid a lot of attention to the enemy, but during the critical moment before the battle, I neglected the terrain of this place. Even if I didn't know about the strangeness of this place, when I saw the person I was chasing suddenly stop, I should have been on guard. Su Ming looked at the drawing board, and the scene from that time appeared clearly in his head. I could have not been injured in this battle, and that boy, I could have not made any mistakes with him. Even if I didn't kill him, I could have taken him away and returned his freedom to him once I was safe. Su Ming closed his eyes. When he opened them once again, he flicked the drawing board with his right hand. A thin layer of dust flew into the air and swept away the previous picture. Then, Su Ming continued drawing with his right hand. This time, what appeared on the drawing board was also a forest. Su Ming was sitting cross-legged on a big tree, and there were a dozen something shamans charging towards him. I'm not vigilant enough, and I'm not careful enough in my actions. That's the land of the shamans. If I had set up a lot of traps in the area before I rested, if I had brought out the red meadow and the beast skin before I rested, then I wouldn't have needed to use the treasure eldest senior brother gave me, and I wouldn't have suffered too many injuries. I would have been able to kill these people one by one. Su Ming waved his right hand and continued drawing on the drawing board. What appeared on the drawing board was the scene of Su Ming and the old shaman chasing after each other in the forest, as well as their counterattack. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes as he looked at the picture. I didn't make any mistakes in this battle, but if I hadn't changed my previous 2 mistakes, then perhaps there wouldn't have been this battle. Even if there was, because I had bought enough time, it shouldn't have been so difficult for me to win. This trip to the land of the shamans allowed me to see that there are still a lot of things I lack when it comes to actual combat. Be careful, be careful, be more careful. Determination appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Summing up his mistakes in this battle and summing up his inadequacies in this battle was the path Su Ming came up with so that he could become stronger. A life and death crisis would definitely not just give him a chance to get lucky and the pleasant surprise of surviving a disaster. If that was the case, then perhaps he would not get lucky a second time. In Su Ming's eyes, a life and death crisis would bring him a metamorphosis and growth. He would continuously perfect himself, continuously correct some of his mistakes and the way he handled things. This would allow him to obtain a higher chance of survival when he faced the next danger. I have to be careful with each step I take and each action I do. I have to be wary of the dangers that might appear around me at any moment. Only by doing so can I survive during Sky Mist Shaman Hunt and become stronger. Su Ming closed his eyes and remembered the lesson he learned this time. Besides the inadequacies in my words and actions, there's one more thing that I have to be wary of and correct. Su Ming opened his eyes and lifted his right hand to draw a line in the air before him. Once that line was drawn, Su Ming looked at the spot he had drawn, and his eyes shone brightly. I've completed this line. Perhaps it's not perfect, but with my current level of cultivation and my epiphany, this is my limit. Yet besides this line, I don't have any other divine abilities or arts that I can use to fight against powerful enemies. Su Ming frowned. Before he entered the ninth summit, he had not had this worry. Yet once he entered the ninth summit and searched for a method to clear his mind based on Tian Xiezi's teachings, he no longer had the chance to learn any other divine abilities or arts. During the battle against the shamans, Su Ming had felt this weakness and inadequacy of his. I lack divine abilities. Speed is my specialty, but when I faced that old shaman, I couldn't use it at all. Besides divine abilities and speed, it was the same for my defense. The divine general armor is fine when I run into enemies of the same level as me. But if I run into powerful warriors, I won't be able to recover in time and shatter. This is because I didn't go to the Great Yu Dynasty to get the real armor, which is why it's not sturdy. Thank goodness I have Ha Mountain Bell, but to me, the bell chimes can only make people fall into a daze. It's not a form of defense. Using it for defense can only be the final method to protect my life. Besides these, I also lack enchanted vessels. The ice and fire eldest senior brother gave me have disappeared. Uncle Masterbai's divine clone has also disappeared. I'll have to make a lot of preparations before Sky Miss Shaman Hunt. Su Ming frowned. There's also not much medicinal pills left. I'll need to create more of them. The power of spirit plunder has surpassed my expectations. This thing can only make the old shaman withdraw for an instant. I might not be able to grasp the weakness in that instant, but if I'm fast enough, if I can use 2 or 3 or even more spirit plunder to freeze him, then I might have a chance. In silence, Su Ming touched the black stone hanging around his neck. Gradually, the image of the medicinal pills he could create appeared in his head. There was an item called the welcoming of deities that existed in the medicinal pills he could create. When the old shaman saw my spirit plunder, he said that it was the shaman tribe's barren core. Could it be that my stone came from the shaman tribe? Su Ming frowned. He felt that it did not seem like it. As Su Ming was immersed in his thoughts, the sky outside the cave abode was no longer dark. It gradually brightened up, and when the sky was completely bright, morning arrived. As the morning sun shone on the cave abode, Su Ming took a deep breath. He already had a plan in mind for what he wanted to do next, so he got up and walked out of the cave. It had been 6 days, ever since he was brought away by Tian Xiezi until he came back. This was the first time he stood on the platform outside the cave abode once again. He breathed in the cold wind in the morning and looked at the sea of clouds beyond the mountain. He also looked at the occasional snow falling or being swept up by the wind. He stood there and looked at the end of the world. The place might be blurry, but Su Ming's eyes seemed to be able to see what the land of the shamans looked like on this morning beyond sky mist barrier, beyond that blurry place. Youngest junior brother, good morning. A voice that was as gentle as the spring breeze came from behind Su Ming. As Su Ming turned around, he saw his second senior brother walking towards him with his usual gentle smile on his face, dressed in a long robe. Second senior brother, you're up early. Su Ming was slightly surprised. It was rare for him to see his second senior brother waking up so early. Most of the time, his second senior brother would only wake up in the afternoon. After all, he would need to rest when the sun rose after he wandered about the place during the night. Second senior brother let out a few fake coughs and turned his face slightly to the side, allowing the sun to shine on it. Youngest junior brother, I understand now. There's a saying that goes, sleeping early and waking up early is good for your health. Second senior brother shook his head. Su Ming smiled and did not speak. Second senior brother was just about to say something when a sharp glint suddenly appeared in his eyes. He looked at Su Ming carefully and even lifted his right hand to pat Su Ming's body. Once he circled Su Ming once, he suddenly spoke in a low voice. Fourth brother, tell your senior brother, did Master come to find you in the middle of the night wearing purple clothes? How did you answer? My answer was, I wanted to see. Su Ming smiled. That's not good. Second senior brother was momentarily stunned before a smile appeared on his face. His smile grew wider and wider until he eventually started laughing loudly. Why didn't I think of that? That's really not good. A hint of anticipation appeared briefly in second senior brother's eyes, and he patted Su Ming's shoulder. And then? What did Master do? He brought me to watch a battle, watched a sun being made, went to the land of the shamans, and killed a group of shamans. Su Ming said softly. Second senior brother widened his eyes, and a fascinated look appeared on his face. Determination gradually appeared in his eyes. Next time, when Master comes to me in purple, I'll give you the same answer. Second senior brother was just about to continue speaking when he suddenly lifted his head and quickly smoothed out his robes. He even turned his body sideways so that the sun could shine on the side of his face, and a gentle smile appeared on his lips. In the sky, 2 long arcs whistled through the air from the 7th summit. The 2 arcs came one after the other, and in the front was a woman. The woman was beautiful, but she was frowning, looking a little unwilling. It was Ziyin. Once she closed in on the 9th summit, she glared at Ziche. Ziche did not dare look at her, and quickly lowered his head. At that moment, second senior brother stepped forward and kept the side of his face illuminated by the sun as he spoke gently to Ziyin. Miss Ziyin, let's go. As he spoke, he took a step toward the sky and walked towards Ziyin. He turned into 2 long arcs and left into the distance unwillingly. Su Ming did not look at second senior brother and Ziyin leaving. Instead, he looked at the second long arc that came from the 7th summit. There was a woman dressed in white. Her hair was tied up with a red string made of grass and turned into 2 small braids by her ears. There were some sparkling crystals on her forehead. At that instant, a dazed look appeared in Su Ming's eyes. On the first day of the 3rd watch. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 278. Su Ming. The woman in white who revealed her canine teeth when she smiled walked down from the sky. There was a ribbon under her feet, and that ribbon floated in the air, causing the woman to look as if she was walking on air. She walked to the platform before Su Ming. Her voice was gentle, and when it fell into Su Ming's ears, it sounded as if it had traveled through the passage of time, awakening the grief buried deep within his memories, along with the promise he could not fulfill in the past. At that moment, snow was blown by the wind from the sky. It was swept up and flew into the air before falling between Su Ming and the woman. The snow covered his vision, as if it had split his vision into pieces. Then, as the snow floated down, it gathered together once again. Su Ming, do you still remember me? The woman in white bit her bottom lip, and a hint of wildness appeared in her bright and beautiful eyes. She approached him with light steps and slowly walked towards him. The faint fragrance that came from her body wafted into Su Ming's face as the wind blew into his nose and entered the depths of his soul. Under the illumination of the sun in the sky, the glitter on the woman's forehead shone with a brilliant light. When it shone into Su Ming's eyes, it also entered the place where his memories were buried. The hair that stood up, the 2 braids by her ears, and the few strands of hair that were lifted by the wind as she got closer touched Su Ming's face. Why didn't you come to me? The woman whispered softly. Her gentle voice echoed in Su Ming's ears. A shudder ran through Su Ming's body. He stared at the woman before him blankly, and grief appeared in his eyes. Su Ming, do you still remember me? Do you still remember my name? Do you still remember the first time we met? The woman's soft words seeped into Su Ming's heart. I remember, Su Ming mumbled. He lifted his right hand and stroked the woman's black hair before him. Once he untied the red string, he tied it up again, then placed the braids by her ears behind her shoulders. Finally, he took off the sequins on the woman's forehead and changed the distribution of the crystals. Once he was done, Su Ming's eyes were calm as he spoke languidly. This will make us look more alike. Once Su Ming finished speaking, the woman immediately frowned, and it was difficult for her to hide the disgust on her face. She took a few steps back, as if Su Ming's hand touching her hair was also difficult for her to accept. If you can become her and make me treat you as her. Then, when you leave, the mission Suma Xin gave you will be considered completed." He cast a glance at the woman before him, then turned around and walked towards Ziche, who was occasionally looking at them from a distance. Baisu stomped her foot on the ground. It could be said that she had prepared meticulously for the shock she would bring to Su Ming this morning. In fact, she had even rehearsed the ambiguous words she would say, the expression she would make when she spoke, and the expression she would make when she spoke. In fact, before she came in the morning, she even practiced in front of the ice mirror. In that moment, she felt as if she had become a different person. It was as if a strange spirit had condensed in her body and changed her every word and action. She knew deep in her heart that the first time she pretended to be the person in his memories and met Su Ming in this form for the first time would be her best chance. In fact, if she seized this chance, then there was a high possibility that nothing else would happen. In truth, when she saw the dazed look on Su Ming's face just now, she was still feeling pleased with herself. When she noticed the sadness in Su Ming's eyes when he looked at her, it made her even more satisfied with her meticulous preparations the night before. Yet things did not progress according to her wishes. Su Ming's final words and actions made by Su know that her preparations for the entire night had failed during their first meeting in this manner. Su Ming walked towards Ziche, and as Ziche looked at him respectfully, Su Ming gave him an order. "I need something that isn't big, but is very heavy. The heavier, the better. Can you get something like this?" Ziche fell into a moment of silence before he nodded his head. "Master, I know of a type of ice called drowning ice. It's said that this ice will never melt. A piece the size of a fist is the same weight as a mountain rock the size of a person. The more, the better." Su Ming lifted his right hand and swung it. A plate fell into Ziche's hand. Ziche looked at the plate, and a strange expression appeared on his face. Before he came to the 9th summit, this plate could be said to be a sacred item. Yet now, the more he learned about it, especially when he learned that he had borrowed this item from Huzi, the calmer he became. He wrapped his fist in his palm towards Su Ming with the plate in hand, then turned into a long arc and charged away. Once Ziche left, Su Ming walked towards Huzi's cave abode along the mountain stairs. Baisu stomped her feet once again. When she saw that Su Ming was ignoring her, she took a few brisk steps forward and caught up to him. "Hey, didn't you say that you're going to teach me how to draw? What do you want to draw?" Su Ming did not stop moving, and his voice was neither fast nor slow. "Slow down, I want to draw myself." Baisu took a few brisk steps forward, and only then did she manage to keep pace with Su Ming. It was clear that she did not want to be behind him. Even if the ice on the mountain stairs was rather slippery, she still wanted to keep pace with him. It's easy to draw yourself. Just face the ice and look at your reflection on the ice. Then draw it. Su Ming's voice was still the same, calm and placid. Then why am I looking for you?" Baisu was momentarily stunned. Then anger appeared on her face. However, Su Ming was walking very quickly. Usually, with just one step, he would cover several dozens of feet. She found it hard to keep up. "I didn't ask you to come to me." Su Ming did not even turn his head back. He gradually widened the distance between him and Baisu. Baisu gritted her teeth and started running once again. "I won't draw myself anymore. I want to draw you." Baisu's voice traveled into Su Ming's ears from behind. Su Ming stopped and turned his head around to cast a glance at Baisu running towards him. When Baisu saw that Su Ming was no longer moving forward, she quickly ran to his side and felt pleased with herself. "Let's see how you'll answer me this time. If I need to face the ice to draw myself, then if I want to draw someone else, I'll naturally need that person to stand there before I can draw. You want to draw me?" Su Ming looked at Baisu. The pride in Baisu's heart showed on her face. She lifted her chin, and the glitter on her forehead shone under the sunlight. Her hair, which was tied up in a ponytail, moved with the wind. "That's right, I want to draw you." Baisu let out a harumph. That smug look of hers overlapped with the figure buried deep in Su Ming's memories for an instant. Su Ming lifted his right hand and drew a line across an ice rock by his side. With a few strokes, a large amount of ice shards danced in the air, and a person appeared on the ice rock. That person was naturally Su Ming. Draw according to this. Once Su Ming finished speaking, he turned around and walked away. Bai Su was stunned for a moment by the side. She looked at the person Su Ming had drawn on the mountain rock by her side, then at Su Ming, who was walking into the distance. She stomped her foot on the ground once again. Su Ming, you bastard. Bai Su's current appearance and expression, as well as her words, were completely different from when she was with Sima Xian. Usually, in front of Sima Xian, Bai Su would always look innocent and naive. She would always look at Sima Xian with a gentle gaze and an obedient expression, worshipping him. Yet when she was before Su Ming on the ninth summit, she seemed to have become a different person. If Sima Xian was here, he would definitely be stunned, because the Bai Su at that moment was very different from the Bai Su before him in the past. Bai Su puffed up her cheeks and glared at Su Ming. Once she stomped her foot on the ground, she saw that Su Ming had already walked far away and she could no longer see his back. She glared at Su Ming's portrait on the mountain rock by her side and lifted her foot to kick it. I'll kick you, you bastard, Su Ming. Bai Su kicked a few times in succession, as if her anger had dissipated slightly. She looked at Su Ming's portrait on the layer of ice, and a thought suddenly appeared in her head. The smug look appeared on her face once again. She took a few steps forward and brought out a black cylinder from her bosom. She started painting on Su Ming's portrait, and as she did so, she smiled smugly. Not long after, Su Ming walked into Hu Zi's cave slowly. He did not hear any snores. Instead, there was strange laughter coming from within the cave. Su Ming did not stop and walked in. The moment he entered Hu Zi's cave, Su Ming immediately saw Hu Zi crouching down on the ground. There were numerous circular pictures drawn before him in a messy manner. There was also a picture of a mountain among those pictures. They surrounded each other as if there was some sort of trajectory within them. Hu Zi held a dagger in his hand and continued carving on the pictures. As he continued carving, he let out that strange laughter. If Su Ming saw Bai Su's expression at that moment, then he would definitely think that she was somewhat similar to Hu Zi. Ha ha, your grandpa who is the smartest. So what if you change the rune? Damn it, just watch how I'll break it for you. Your grandpa who has lived for so long and I've never run into anything that I can't get through. Damn it, it's such a difficult thing. I'll understand it after I sleep. Hu Zi was too engrossed in his work that he did not notice Su Ming's arrival. In fact, when Su Ming stood behind him and looked at the pictures Hu Zi was carving, Hu Zi did not even notice it. Your grandpa who used 10 days, and I've only drunk around 30 pots of wine in those 10 days. It's all your fault that I drank so little. Damn it, why did you people from the 7th peak have to switch to the Great Mountain Defense battle? Just watch how I'm going to break it. Hu Zi picked up the dagger and carved a few more pictures on the ground. Excitement and joy appeared on his face as he lifted his head and laughed. Yet the moment he lifted his head and laughed, he saw Su Ming standing beside him. He was stunned and his laughter stopped abruptly. Fourth, when did you come? I've been here for a long time. There was a strange look on Su Ming's face as he looked at Hu Zi, whose hair was a mess and whose eyes were bloodshot. You heard everything? Hu Zi's face was stern. I heard part of it. Su Ming's expression became even stranger. Hu Zi lowered his head, then lifted it abruptly and hugged Su Ming. His voice was like a tidal wave that echoed in the cave abode. Fourth, you're truly my dearest junior brother. You knew that your senior brother, Hu Zi, would succeed today, so you came to congratulate me. All right, you're a good junior brother. I won't hide it from you, so you can be my judge. Tell me, do these damned, shameless, perverted, and despicable 7th summit that angers both men and gods, do they have any sense of justice? Do they have any conscience? Do they have any morals? They actually changed the mountain protection rune. I'm asking for recommendations and monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 279. It's the mountain protection rune. Fourth, you don't know how troublesome it is to change that rune? Really troublesome. Who would change that thing so easily? But that damned seventh summit, they're going too far. Hu Zi hugged Su Ming tightly with anger on his face. Su Ming finally broke free from his grip and looked at the enraged Hu Zi, unable to say a single word. They're going too far. I can't tolerate this. Hu Zi lifted his arms and roared. Fourth, what's with that expression? It was rare for Hu Zi to see the strange expression on Su Ming's face, even though he was so angry. No, it's nothing. Su Ming let out a few fake coughs. He felt that this was not the right time to discuss things with Hu Zi. Just as he was about to find a way to leave, Hu Zi's angry roars reverberated in the air once again. They're insulting me. They're blatantly provoking me. Youngest junior brother, don't you think so? Aren't they going too far? Aren't they too heartless? Aren't they too immoral? Aren't they too shameless? Hu Zi paced around the cave abode with his messy hair, making him look as if he had gone mad as he roared non-stop. They're going too far. I've been helping them take care of that rune all the time. They're heartless. I've helped them fix that rune a few times in the past. They're too immoral. How could they not tell me when they changed the rune? Third senior brother, I still have something to do. I'll be leaving now. Su Ming quickly took a few steps back, intending to leave. Youngest junior brother, don't go. Hu Zi took a few quick steps forward and blocked Su Ming's path. His face was still filled with anger, but there was also excitement within that anger. Youngest junior brother, please be my judge. Tell me, I haven't been in the mountain for many years, but did you know that the 7th summit has changed the mountain protection rune 6 times? 6 times, and this is the 7th time. Aren't they being too much a bully? Every single time they change it, it's much more complicated. I have to rack my brains to think of a way to get in. This time, they're going too far. They're going too far this time. I used a total of 10 days to calculate, and I didn't go out to peek. 10 days. Su Ming smiled wryly. He was about to speak when the excitement on Hu Zi's face instantly surpassed his anger. But Hu Zi waved his hand, his bloodshot eyes shining brightly. In the end, it was still broken by her grandpa who, damn her grandpa, this mountain protection battle is nothing. I'm the smartest. Youngest junior brother, look. Hu Zi dragged Su Ming to the side of the carvings on the ground and pointed at the dazzling pictures. Breaking the formation is easy. The difficult part is how to make the formation automatically open the door for me without being discovered. Look, this line is me. The more Hu Zi spoke, the more excited he became. He took the dagger and drew a curved line on the ground. The line twisted on the ground and entered the deepest part of the patterns. It did not touch any other carvings along the way, as if it had opened up a path out of thin air. Tonight, I'll let the 7th peak know that their grandpa who is here again. Hu Zi patted his chest and laughed loudly. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He crouched down and looked at the pictures on the ground carefully. After a long while, he lifted his head and looked at the smug Hu Zi. A smile appeared on his face. Third senior brother, you're indeed the smartest. When Hu Zi heard that, he became even more smug and patted Su Ming's shoulder. You're my soulmate, youngest junior brother. There's nothing else to say. Tonight, I'll bring you to broaden your horizons. I know a few good places in the 7th summit, but I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even tell Master when he came to me dressed in flowery clothes. I've decided. I'll bring you to see Tian Lanming. What do you think? Hu Zi spoke excitedly, but when he saw Su Ming's gaze falling on the pictures on the ground once again, he blinked and did not speak. Third senior brother, do you think that if I carve this rune on armor, will it have the same effect? Su Ming mumbled as he stared at the rune on the ground, and a bright light shone in his eyes. He came to find Hu Zi because of this. The idea was originally a little vague, but it started when he saw Hu Zi creating the rune that reflected the 7th summit. He had mumbled something that Zi Che did not hear, and the gist of it was that he wanted to build the rune more securely the next time. This gave Su Ming an inspiration, and an incredibly bold idea appeared in his heart. It might be a little ridiculous, but Su Ming could not give up on the temptation that would come with success. That was why he had come to have a chat with Hu Zi. However, when he saw the pattern on the ground, this thought became even clearer in his mind. Card on armor? Hu Zi was momentarily stunned. He scratched his head, and, after thinking for a long time, he shook his head. That won't do. I don't have the materials for that. Besides, Huzi frowned and paused halfway through his sentence before he fell into deep thought. Third senior brother. Su Ming stood up and shifted his gaze away from the pictures on the ground to look at Huzi. I need some pictures of the mountain protection rune, from simple to complicated. I'll have to trouble you with this, senior brother. Huzi was still frowning. When he heard Su Ming's words, he nodded and patted his chest. All right, I'll help you prepare it over the next few days. But, youngest junior brother, I think it'll be a little difficult for you to complete your idea. We don't have the materials for that. Besides, these mountain protection runes can change. They're not inanimate objects. Even if you carve them on them, they won't change. Su Ming smiled faintly and wrapped his fist in his palm towards Huzi. While Huzi was still puzzled, he walked out of his cave abode. Huzi thought about it for a long time in his cave abode. He still felt that it would be difficult to do, but since his youngest junior brother needed it, then he would naturally do his best to prepare it. However, when his gaze fell on the pictures on the ground, his eyes immediately lit up. He no longer thought about how Su Ming would carve the runes on the armor. Instead, he rubbed his hands excitedly. Darn it, tonight, I'll let the 7th Summit know that I'm here again. They're too much. They're too heartless. Huzi brought out his wine gourd and took a big swig from it. He started giggling like an idiot as he imagined what he was going to do at night. As Su Ming left Huzi's cave abode, he kept running through the idea that made his heart pound in excitement. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he was that it was possible. This requires fine control. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. As he walked, he suddenly came to a halt. His gaze fell on Bai Su, who was standing in the distance with a smug and arrogant look on her face. Su Ming, I've finished drawing. Bai Su had been waiting for a long time. When she finally saw Su Ming return, she immediately pointed at the ice rock by her side and spoke in a clear voice. Su Ming swept his gaze over and saw that his appearance on the ice rock had been changed. His face was a mess, and there was a huge shell on his back. There was also Bai Su's drawing on the ice wall beside him. She had drawn a turtle with its neck stretched out. That turtle looked alive, and the expression in its eyes was especially similar to Su Ming's. Su Ming's expression remained the same. Once he got closer, he took a look and nodded. Not bad. Continue. Once he finished speaking, he walked past Bai Su calmly and left into the distance. Bai Su was momentarily stunned. Su Ming's calmness made her angry once again, and she ran towards him once again. Hey, I'm drawing you. I know. Su Ming did not slow down. He continued moving forward and walked up the stairs. Do you think I look like it? Bai Su refused to give in. No. Su Ming's tone was flat. If you don't look like it, then how can you say that my drawing is not bad? In my eyes, my drawing is very similar to yours. Bai Su ran quickly and barely managed to keep up with Su Ming. That's why I asked you to continue drawing. Su Ming returned to the platform outside his cave abode. Just as he was about to enter, Bai Su's furious voice came from behind him. Su Ming, what's the meaning of this? I dressed up like this just like you told me to, and you agreed to teach me how to draw, but the day is almost over. What did you teach me? Bai Su stood on the platform and glared at Su Ming. You still don't look like it. Su Ming turned around and looked at Bai Su. How so? Bai Su immediately asked. Her expression doesn't look like it. She wouldn't be so noisy, Su Ming said coldly. Bai Su stared at Su Ming. After a long while, she closed her eyes. When she opened them once again, she had walked to the edge of the platform and had her back turned towards Su Ming. She looked at the land in the distance and lifted her hands to tie up her hair once again. Once she tore open her collar, she revealed the fur at her collar, making it look as if there was a ball of soft fur wrapped around it. Once she was done, she lowered her head and tore off a large piece of her long dress. As the pieces of her dress were blown away by the wind, the tight long pants under her dress and the fur boots on her feet were revealed. She then turned around and pursed her lips as she looked at Su Ming. The disgust in her eyes was no longer there, replaced by a gentleness. The two braids on her shoulders swayed as she turned around, causing a few strands of her hair to float before her eyes. A hint of wildness abruptly appeared by Sue's face, her clothes, and her face. At that moment, snow fell from the wind, and some of it landed on her hair. It could not hide the wildness in her eyes and the gentleness within them. That gaze made Su Ming fall into a daze once again. The wind and snow became stronger and blew between her and Su Ming. Everything around them seemed to have fallen silent. Only the falling snow and the intersecting gazes could be heard. Su Ming, you're back. Do you still remember what you promised me? A gentle voice echoed in the air and seemed to have fused together with the snow, causing Su Ming to fall silent. A smile appeared by Su's face. That smile was very clear, very beautiful, and very happy. She looked at Su Ming, and her laughter sounded like silver bells. She took a light step backwards and left the platform. She did not transcend, and neither did she have anything under her feet. She fell rapidly towards the canyons under the 9th summit. Su Ming, you're back, but I left. By Su's body continued falling. A hint of wildness appeared in her eyes. She did not want to accept defeat. She wanted to take a gamble. As she fell rapidly, she kept looking at the platform of the 9th summit that was getting further and further away from her. Only when she felt something soft under her body and wind blew towards her, causing her falling body to gradually slow down, did a prideful smile appear by Su's face once again. I went on the first day. Su Ming turned around quietly and walked back into his cave abode. The moment he turned around, he mumbled softly, "Her arrogance is also very similar to yours. I'll continue tomorrow at midnight. I'm begging for monthly votes and recommendation votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to cast recommendation votes and monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 280. The first day by Su and Su Ming truly met each other passed just like that as the sky darkened and the moon appeared. On this day, Bai Su felt that she had won. She felt that she had done her best on this day. She had successfully made Su Ming notice her, and she had even left a faint mark in his heart. If she had not won, then there would have been no confusion when they first met. If she had not won, then there would have been no gentle breeze when they parted. Bai Su felt that she had indeed won. Her actions before they parted had brought out the arrogance and boldness in her personality. When she thought about it, Bai Su could still feel her heart pounding against her chest. She sat in her cave abode on the 7th summit and looked at the bronze mirror before her. As she looked at herself in the mirror, a prideful smile gradually appeared on her face. Su Ming, oh Su Ming, you must not have thought that I would do this in the end, right? Heh. When Bai Su remembered that scene, besides her heart racing, she also felt a hint of fear. She did not know what had happened to her. How could she have done such a crazy thing in the end? It was as if she was no longer herself at that moment, but had turned into someone else. As she looked at her reflection in the bronze mirror, Bai Su felt a sense of unfamiliarity. In the mirror, her black hair was tied up by a red string. There were braids hanging down her shoulders, and there were some bright spots on her forehead. This was a look that Bai Su had never put on before today. She looked at herself and looked at herself. This isn't bad. Bai Su pursed her lips into a smile and gradually closed her eyes, immersing herself in meditation and breathing. On this day, she did not go to Sima Xian. In fact, Sima Xian's name did not even appear in her head, which was a rare sight. She looked forward to the next day with a sense of happiness that she did not even notice. With a prideful smile on her lips, she looked forward to the next day. The 9th summit was silent in the dark. Ziche stood respectfully outside Su Ming's cave abode. Before him were a dozen ice stones the size of a fist. The ice stones let out a freezing air, and when the wind blew past, the cold air would fall on Su Ming's face, causing his eyes to sparkle. These stones won't melt when touched by fire, but they're not sturdy. You can use the freezing air to make them take on various forms. Master, we don't have much time, so this is all I can find. But don't worry, Master, I will continue to search. Give me a month, and I will collect more and more. When he saw Su Ming nodding his head, he retreated hundreds of feet away and sat down cross-legged, waiting for Su Ming's orders. Su Ming looked at the dozen something ice stones. Once he picked one up, he immediately felt the weight of that stone. It was only the size of a fist, but it was already as heavy as a human-shaped mountain. Such a strange stone, but it has a fatal flaw. Su Ming squeezed his right hand, and cracks immediately appeared on the ice stone. With a bang, it shattered and turned into several pieces, but each piece weighed more than what it should have. Once he picked up the shattered pieces, Su Ming brought out an item from his storage bag with his left hand. The moment that item appeared, Ziche's pupil shrank. It was a round pearl. It was Su Ming's spirit plunder. The moment that pearl appeared, it sucked in all the light around it. It was dark, and it looked as if it had turned into a hole that floated beside Su Ming. If one's gaze could penetrate the dim light on the outside and see the inside of the scattered stone, one could clearly see that there were wisps of smoke curling around it, slowly rotating. In the center of the smoke was an ice flower, and on that ice flower was a demonic eye. This eye had two pupils. Su Ming did not have the freezing air to change the ice stone's appearance and turn it into the item he wanted. Even if there were many people in Freezing Sky Clan who mainly practiced the path of cold, Su Ming had spirit plunder. However, Su Ming had spirit plunder. Contained within that pill was a manifestation of the prodigy Si Ma Xian's berserker mark. As Su Ming pointed at spirit plunder with his left hand, the dark light on the pill instantly disappeared. What replaced it was the ice flower that looked as if it was sealed within, surrounded by wisps of smoke. That flower exuded an eerie, freezing air that surrounded Su Ming's left hand. As Su Ming pressed against the ice stones, the freezing air spread out and enveloped the area around him. As the freezing air seeped into the stone, the dozen ice stones gradually fused together and shrank rapidly. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, Su Ming lifted his hand, and the freezing air dissipated. What appeared before him were two bracelets formed by the dozen ice stones. The two bracelets were of normal size and were very fragile. If he used a little more force, he would be able to break them. However, the weight of them added together was equivalent to half a small hill. When Su Ming picked up the bracelets, a grave look appeared on his face. They were very heavy, but not to the point where he could not lift them. However, if there were a few more pairs, then unless Su Ming circulated his chi, he would not be able to lift them with just his physical body alone. I hope you can help me increase my speed. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He put the two ice bracelets on his feet, stood up, and took a step forward. With that one step, the platform he stood on trembled slightly. It's still not enough. Su Ming took a few steps back and forth. Once he found that he did not feel too uncomfortable, he no longer thought about it. Instead, he sat down cross-legged once again and looked at the moon in the sky with a contemplative look in his eyes. I can use this ice stone to increase my speed, but it can only increase the speed of my body. If I use it to fly, I won't be able to increase my speed. That's no longer a part of my body, it's an art. Su Ming looked at the moon in the sky, and a picture gradually appeared in his eyes. In that picture, there was a golden light at the end of the world. That golden light traveled tens of thousands of li in the span of a breath and stirred up a huge gust of wind. As it closed in, it shook the sky and earth and turned into a golden rock that was about 10,000 feet in size. This is the fastest speed I've ever seen. Su Ming mumbled and closed his eyes. Su Ming mumbled and closed his eyes. After a moment, when he reopened them, he brought out his drawing board and drew a few lines on it with his right hand. Immediately, a golden rock appeared in Su Ming's eyes on it. In terms of speed, I'll use the ice stone to refine my physical body so that my body can withstand the pressure brought by even faster speeds. It'll make my physical body's speed even faster. Similarly, in terms of speed, I'll copy the instant the golden rock spreads its wings and close in on me as the second style for my picture creation. With this, my speed will be completely increased. Determination appeared in Su Ming's eyes. As for the power of defense, I'll have to wait for third senior brother to send me the runes before I can try it. Su Ming fell into a moment of pensive silence before he focused his mind and started copying the drawing board again and again. He was so focused that he ignored everything around him. His entire mind was on the drawing board, and as he continued drawing, the golden rock charging through the sky appeared one after another. Every single time the golden rock flapped its wings, every single time its feathers changed, and every single time its body changed, the golden rock gradually appeared under Su Ming's fingers. It was just like when he copied C Ma Xin sword slash. As he continued copying, he searched for his own creation. When morning arrived, and the sun had just lifted its head from the horizon, Bai Su appeared on the 9th summit once again. She was still dressed in the same attire, revealing her 2 canine teeth when she smiled. There was a hint of pride in her expression as she walked past Ziche and stood before Su Ming. She looked at Su Ming sitting cross-legged and drawing on the drawing board with the rays of the rising sun shining on his face. Bai Su watched by the side for a long time. She only saw Su Ming drawing on the drawing board with his hand, but she could not see what he was drawing. In her eyes, the drawing board was completely blank. After waiting for a moment, Bai Su grew impatient. "Hey, I've been here for a long time. Don't pretend you didn't see me." Su Ming ignored her and continued drawing. When Ziche saw this from the distance, he smiled wryly and turned his head away. He could not understand Su Ming's actions. If he hated this woman, then why did he let her come? If he did not hate her, then why did he refuse to see her in the first place? Ziche did not understand just what sort of mystery lay behind this. When Bai Su saw that Su Ming did not seem to have hurt her, she let out a harumph and was about to snatch his drawing board away. But just as she was about to take action, for some unknown reason, when she saw the concentration on Su Ming's face, her outstretched hand froze for a moment. As if she hesitated for a moment, Bai Su still grabbed the drawing board. The moment she touched it, her hair suddenly floated up. The red string tying her hair together immediately shattered, causing her long hair to float in the air. Her robes also started fluttering violently, as if there was a huge gust of wind blowing past them. Bai Su's face turned pale in an instant. Her vision blurred, and she felt as if she had lost her soul. She was sucked into the drawing board and appeared in an unfamiliar world. In that world, she saw a ray of golden light flashing through the dark sky. Once that ray of golden light disappeared, another ray appeared. Bai Su did not know how much time had passed, but the rays of golden light she saw were already endless. When she looked as if she had completely lost herself and her mind was in a daze, a cold voice seemed to echo in the muddled world. "This is a lesson. Do not interrupt my training." As the voice spoke, Bai Su felt as if her soul had returned to her body and she had regained control over it. She shuddered, and the world before her eyes shattered. Once it reassembled itself, she saw Su Ming's eyes. There was calmness in those eyes, but within that calmness was an awe-inspiring presence that made Bai Su's heart tremble. Sima Xin did not possess that awe-inspiring gaze. Under that gaze, an indescribable fatigue and weakness appeared in Bai Su's body. She staggered a few steps back, and her vision blurred before she fell to the ground. She had fainted because she did not have Su Ming's divine sense, which surpassed most of the berserkers. With her weak mind, she could not withstand the golden rock's light as Su Ming continued drawing. "Send her down the mountain. We can have a few days of peace now," Su Ming said slowly and continued immersing himself in copying the drawing. Ziche quickly walked over and with a wave of his arm, he swept Bai Su up and left the 9th summit. "Thank you to Helan Mountain's soul, the sacred king of Golden Spirit, and the 3 Alliance Masters for your support. Thank you for sending the 3 golden rocks to protect us. May the 3 of you achieve great things, just like how the golden rocks spread their wings and cover the heavens." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 281. There was a rumor that had been circulating for a very long time in the world of berserkers. It was said that this rumor had been left behind during the era of the first god of berserkers. This legend spoke of a butterfly called Harmonious Morris alba in the distant south in the ancient past, before the land of the Berserkers was divided into 5 parts. This butterfly was not big, and it was only the size of a human hand. It possessed all the colors in the world, and each of them was different. She flew in the sky, but no one could see her because the world that belonged to her was above the 9 heavens filled with whirlwinds. The rumor said that even though she was a butterfly and had beautiful wings, she could only flap her wings 3 times in her life. Besides these 3 times, she danced in the wind. The first time she flapped her wings was when she was born on the ground and flew above the 9 heavens. The second time she flapped her wings was when she was at the peak of her life. When she flapped her wings, she danced in a dazzling manner to search for her companions, but most of the time, she could not find them. The last time she flapped her wings was when she reached the end of her life. To leave behind a mark, she used all her strength. At the instant she flapped her wings, her body would turn into sparks of light, and like seeds, they would scatter on the ground with the wind. These seeds could turn into cocoons, but only one of them could become a butterfly. This rumor spoke of the series of legends brought about by the 3 times Harmonious Morris alba flapped her wings. It was said that when she flapped her wings for the first time, she would cause a change that could cause mountains to crumble and the earth to crack in the east. When she flapped her wings for the second time, swarms of gray-eyed corpses would appear in the west. When she flapped her wings for the third time, the snow in the north would be covered in darkness that would last for decades. This was a legend. Su Ming had never heard of this legend before, but Bai Su had. On one night, the unconscious Bai Su woke up from her dream. She stared at the unfamiliar world in a daze. She stood alone with a lost expression on her face. She knew that she was dreaming. She knew that everything she saw was an illusion and did not exist. However, she couldn't truly wake up from this dream and make it disappear. From what she could see, there was snow on the ground, and the sky was dark with snowflakes drifting down. The surroundings were very quiet, and from afar, there was only a mountain range in one direction. The other directions were all plains. In the place where the mountain range was, there was a blurry mountain that was covered by the wind and snow. She vaguely felt that she had seen this mountain before. It was a mountain that towered into the clouds, like a person's 5 fingers reaching out from the earth to grab the sky. "Where is this place?" Bai Su murmured, her eyes even more confused. In that state of confusion, she slowly walked forward. The snow path under her feet seemed to contain the passage of time, causing her to feel as if she had passed through 4 seasons with every step she took. As she walked and walked, she arrived at a forest. She did not know how long she had been walking in the forest, but suddenly she heard a clamor of voices by her ears. The voice came from afar, causing Bai Su to stop in her tracks. She subconsciously walked towards the source of the voice. Gradually, she passed through the forest and saw a sight. It was a land without any forest. There were a lot of tents on it, and there were also a lot of powerful berserkers patrolling the area with aloof gazes. There were quite a number of people walking back and forth between the tents. This was a small-scale market of a tribe. There were plenty of places like this in the land of South Morning, and it was convenient for small tribes to trade with each other. Bai Su looked at the unfamiliar faces. The noise that traveled into her ears was very real, but she could see these people, but they could not see her. One of the patrolling berserkers even passed through Bai Su's body and walked past her. "This place is..." Bai Su became even more confused. Yet the moment she was lost, she suddenly shuddered. She saw 2 people charging towards her from the forest, not too far away. One of the 2 people was very strong and had a simple and honest look on his face. The person beside him was also a teenager, but he was very thin and weak. He had delicate features, and there was a clear light in his eyes. He wore a bee-skin robe, and there was still a youthful look on his face. But the moment Bai Su saw the teenager, her heart trembled. Su Ming." Bai Su's breathing quickened. She did not expect that she would dream of Su Ming. The Su Ming in her eyes was still a youthful teenager. That thin and weak look was similar to the Su Ming in Bai Su's memories, but there were many other things that were completely different. Yet at that moment, a delicate voice called out to her. Lei Chen. Su instinctively looked towards the direction of the voice. When she saw the girl who spoke, a bang went off in Su's head. She saw a girl dressed in a mink fur robe. Her long hair was tied up with a red straw rope, and there were small braids hanging down her shoulders. There were a few bright spots on her forehead, and there was anger in her eyes. She frowned as she looked at Su Ming's companion. Her appearance made Su fall into a daze. It was a girl who looked exactly like her. The scene froze in Su's eyes and gradually disappeared. She opened her eyes swiftly, and a large amount of sweat broke out on her forehead. She looked around and saw that she was in her cave abode. It was very quiet outside. Not a single sound could be heard. Su stared ahead blankly. There was no focus in her eyes. The scene from her dream remained in her head. After a long while, Su put on a robe and pushed open the door to her cave abode. The sky was dark, and there was a cold breeze blowing in, causing Su to feel slightly cold. She stood outside her cave abode and looked at the dark sky. Under the moonlight, her gaze eventually fell on the 9th summit. As she looked at it, confusion and a complicated look appeared in her eyes. Why did I have this dream? Was everything in that dream real or fake? Su mumbled. It was also on this night that Su Ming continued copying the golden rock. At some point in time, his finger froze and a dreamlike scene appeared in his head. In that scene was a world covered in snow and wind. The wind was strong and snow danced in the air, blocking his vision. He could not see too far into the distance. He saw a girl about 7 or 8 years old crying as she ran forward. There was a woman's back before the girl, as she was gradually leaving into the distance. Ma, don't go. Ma, don't you want me anymore? The woman stopped for a moment, but she did not turn her head back. She continued walking forward quickly. Only the girl's cries could be heard in the snow and wind. Even when she could no longer chase after her and fell to the ground, she still struggled to get up. With tears in her eyes, she wanted to continue running forward, to grab her mother's hand and ask her not to leave. Yet the woman gradually left into the distance. Her figure could no longer be seen in the snow and wind. As the girl cried, she seemed to have used up all the strength in her weak body and fell into the snow, no longer moving. The snow and wind were strong, and when the wind blew on her body, it caused the girl to hug herself. She closed her eyes and mumbled her mother under her breath, losing consciousness. The little finger of her right hand gradually turned green. It was the color of frozen flesh. Su Ming looked at all of this and remained silent. A man walked out of the snow and wind. Su Ming could only see the man's face indistinctly and could not see his face clearly. He walked to the girl's side and crouched down gently to pick her up before turning around and walking into the distance. Su, come home with Papa. This scene froze in Su Ming's eyes. As it gradually disappeared, a shudder ran through his body and he snapped out of his daze. He looked at his right index finger pausing on the drawing board, and after a brief moment of confusion, he looked towards a corner of the drawing board. That was the spot where Su had touched during the day. Su Ming was momentarily stunned. He lifted his right hand and touched the corner of the drawing board where Su had touched it. A pensive look appeared in his eyes. Why is this happening? Ever since I transcended, I've never dreamed. Even the voice in my dream has never appeared again. But when I was copying the drawing just now, I fell into a daze. Su Ming frowned. This dream doesn't seem fake, and it's impossible for it to have appeared out of thin air. There must be a reason behind it. Su Ming fell silent and thought about it for a long time. When dawn was about to break and the light of dawn appeared, a thought suddenly flashed in Su Ming's head. Could it be that when Su touched the drawing board yesterday, and my divine sense came into contact with it when I focused all my attention on it, a brief connection formed between our memories during that instant? That why I had the dream just now? Could it be that the power of divine sense allows me to see the other person's memories? Su Ming took a deep breath. As his eyes sparkled, he turned into a long arc and left the 9th summit when the sun was about to rise. He charged down the mountain. There were many creatures that loved the cold within the endless ice outside Freezing Sky Clan. Perhaps it was because of the weather, but most of these creatures were aggressive. Su Ming had already been there for almost 2 hours. The sky was already bright, and there were 8 corpses of ice wolves lying beside Su Ming. He had his right hand placed on the head of an ice wolf that was still alive. Su Ming had his eyes closed, and the moment he opened them, the ice wolf shuddered and fell to the ground dead. There was a strange glint in Su Ming's eyes. After a moment of silence, he turned into a long arc and left the place, returning to the 9th summit. Yet the moment he stepped onto the 9th summit and stood on the platform outside his cave abode, he saw Bai Su approaching him once again. At the instant he saw her, a sense of familiarity that surpassed the one he had the day before appeared clearly in her attire and expression. She wore a pair of beast skin boots, a black mink skin coat, a tall and slender body, her hair tied up by a red grass rope, the anger in her eyes, and the frown between her brows. At that moment, Bai Su, with her deliberate disguise, and after seeing the clothes and expression of the woman in his dream with his own eyes, managed to look exactly like her. On the second day of the 3rd watch, there was one more watch. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.